Hello, my name's Avon. At my parents' housewarming party, they stood me in front of everyone and handed me a family contract termination. Yeah, like I'd been fired from being their daughter. They said it was time to move forward as a family, without me. But that wasn't the worst part. They'd already sold the house I helped renovate, transferred guardianship of my niece behind my back, erased me from legal documents. And then they rewrote the story online, called me unstable, said I wasn't even their real child. So I started writing my own story. Want to know how far they went to erase me and what I did about it? It was the kind of Saturday that made Eugene look like a postcard. Crisp sunlight cut across the trimmed lawns, kids zipped past on bikes, and my parents' new beige house gleamed like it had something to prove. Everyone was already gathered out back, beer coolers on the deck, folding chairs half sinking into the grass, a Bluetooth speaker fighting with the sound of laughter. I stood near the grill, flipping hot dogs with one hand and holding a roll of trash bags in the other. I hadn't planned to stay long. I told myself I'd show up, smile just enough, and leave before the usual dynamic swallowed me whole. Then my mother clinked a glass with her fork. The crowd shifted. Someone turned down the music. She stood beside my father, who nodded like they were about to deliver something life-changing. I felt a sliver of tension rise in my chest. Not because I expected anything good, but because I knew the kind of silence that came before a blow. She unfolded a piece of paper. Clean white. Printer perfect. "Thank you all for coming to our housewarming," she began. "Before we toast, we want to share something important with you." I stepped forward slightly, trying to catch her eye. She didn't look at me. "This," she held up the paper, "is a formal notice, a realignment of roles, so to speak. From this day forward, Avon is no longer considered part of the family's support structure. She's released from expectations, obligations, and any assumed involvement in our affairs." There was a beat of silence, the kind that feels like all the oxygen has been drained from the world. I didn't blink, didn't breathe. I heard someone's fork clatter onto a plate. It wasn't the words. It was the tone, like I was being offboarded from a job I didn't know I still held. Selin coughed into her drink. Rion turned to talk to someone about baseball. My father took a long sip from his beer and didn't even flinch, like this had been rehearsed. So I said, without raising my voice, "Was this printed at a Staples?" A few awkward chuckles escaped, but no one looked directly at me. I wasn't angry, not yet, just hollowed out. That piece of paper had more presence than I did. My mother smiled like she'd just nailed a presentation. "Let's eat." People scattered like roaches in sudden light. I stood there, the sun sharp against my neck, still holding the trash bags. I don't remember tossing them. I must have. Because the next thing I knew, I was standing off to the side, near the edge of the patio, watching them group up for the family photo. "Big picture time," someone called. I moved to join, and stopped when I heard Selin murmur, just loud enough, "Maybe sit this one out. You know, optics." "Optics," I repeated under my breath. I stepped back. The photographer framed them, smiles bright, arms looped around each other like it was a Christmas card moment. And me, I stood by the trash bin, holding a plate of untouched salad. Click. Just like that, I was out of the frame. Not metaphorically, not emotionally, physically, cut out as cleanly as a photo crop. They didn't need me there. They just needed me not to cause a scene. I didn't give them one. Instead, I watched the sunlight bounce off the new windows, the ones I'd helped install back in March before the move. I thought about the weekends I'd spent here, repairing drywall, hauling gravel, holding up their dream while mine collected dust. I thought about all the times they'd said thank you without ever saying, "You matter." And then I thought, maybe that paper wasn't the insult I thought it was. Maybe it was freedom disguised as rejection. As the camera clicked without me, I finally realized, this wasn't just a bad moment. It was the last straw. I didn't stay long after the photo. I slipped out the side gate while they were still posing with forced smiles and wine glasses, the clatter of polite laughter echoing behind me. The walk to my car felt longer than it should have. Maybe because I wasn't walking away from a party. I was walking away from a position I'd held my whole life without knowing it had a title. Or a termination date. Back at my apartment, I tossed my keys into the bowl by the door and kicked off my shoes. The place smelled like clean linen and leftover Thai food. It was quiet. The kind of quiet you only notice when your whole body's still vibrating from someone else's noise. I didn't cry. Instead, I poured myself a glass of water, sat on the edge of the couch, and just stared at my phone like it owed me an explanation. No missed calls, no apologies. Not even a text from Celine to smooth things over, which she usually did with her fake sweet tone and emoji band-aids. I set the glass down, opened my laptop, and figured I'd check my schedule for next week. Maybe pick up an extra shift. Something grounding. That's when I saw it. A forwarded email marked FWD:family roles open parenthesis, housewarming planning close parenthesis. Sender, Celine. Accidentally forwarded from her work account. I clicked. At the top. From Thalia Harwood. To Celine, Ryan, Dad. Subject, housewarming planning notes. It started innocent enough. Menu suggestions, table setup, parking coordination. Then, near the bottom, a single paragraph caught me in the chest, like a punch I never saw coming. Avon won't be involved in the photos or speech. She's not part of the structure anymore. She'll understand. She's used to being on the outside. I reread that line 5 times. Not part of the structure anymore. It sounded like I was scaffolding they no longer needed now that the building was done. I leaned back, chest tight, fingers frozen over the trackpad. The worst part wasn't that they'd excluded me. It was that it wasn't spontaneous. It wasn't heat of the moment. It was planned, written, shared. Like a team coordinating how to fire a long-term employee without a lawsuit. I stared at the ceiling for a while, trying to decide if this was worth confronting. Then I picked up my phone and texted Celine. Me. Did you mean to forward that? No response. 15 minutes passed. Then a voice memo. I pressed play. Her voice was soft, almost sing-song. Casual. Avon, look, it's not like we hate you. You're just not needed anymore. You don't have kids, no husband, no house. This is how it works now. I sat very still. She said it like she was explaining why a grocery store discontinued a brand. Not needed anymore. As if love was a job description I had failed to fill. I didn't respond. I didn't throw my phone across the room either. I just placed it face down and walked to the window, where the last of the evening light had faded into a flat gray. They'd always treated me like the extra piece, useful when needed, stored away when not. I thought back to the time I stayed up with Leora during her senior project when Celine had a migraine. Or the weeks I lived with Mom and Dad after Dad's back surgery, missing work to make sure someone was there during recovery. Every time I said yes, I thought it meant I belonged. But maybe all it ever meant was that I was convenient. I made myself sit with that thought. Let it sting. Let it brand. I wasn't just cut out. I'd been edited out long before the ink was dry. The next morning, sunlight slipped through the blinds like it had no idea what happened the night before. I hadn't really slept, just drifted in and out, letting my mind chew on every word Celine said, every line of that email. Not needed anymore. I got out of bed without checking my phone. No one would have texted. I wasn't on their radar unless I had something they wanted. It was strange, though, how quickly you go from family to footnote. After a quick shower, I made a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the same chipped mug I used when I first moved in. The silence wasn't comforting today. It echoed. I don't know what pushed me exactly, but halfway through my coffee, I grabbed my jacket and keys. I told myself it was just to get my work license. I'd left a few old documents in the filing box at the house they'd all moved out of, the house I grew up in. It hadn't sold yet. Dad mentioned that during one of his monologues about market timing, so it would still be there. Empty, but not forgotten. Driving over felt like walking barefoot across glass you laid down yourself. The house sat quiet when I pulled into the driveway. Same dull tan paint, same creaky mailbox, but no life in the windows. No Leora dancing down the hallway, no mom yelling about fingerprints on the fridge, just stillness. I used the spare key, they hadn't changed the locks, and stepped inside. It smelled like dust and faded memories. I headed straight for the closet in what used to be my room, tugged the plastic file box from under a stack of folded tarps. I flipped through folders until I found the one labeled Legal Personal. Inside were old tax forms, copies of job contracts, and something that didn't belong, a manila envelope, no label. I opened it. Inside was a guardianship document, dated 6 months ago. I blinked. At the top, guardianship transfer, Leora Harwood. And below it, primary guardian, Ryan Harwood. My chest went cold. I scanned the page again, hoping I read it wrong. I hadn't. Not only had I been removed, but I wasn't even listed as a secondary contact. Just gone. Leora was 19, still legally under care for another few months, due to the terms Grandma set up after her illness. And I'd promised, sworn, I'd protect her when things got rough. She'd lived with me for a full semester, while Mom was dealing with one of her exhaustion phases. I took her to therapy. I fought for her at school. I filled out every line of every form so she could apply for grants and housing. And now I didn't exist. I sank onto the floor, the file trembling in my hands. I thought I was done being shocked. Turns out I still had room. A sharp memory hit me. Dad talking about some little account Grandma had left for Leora. Something to help when she turned 21. A trust, he said. Nothing big, just enough for school or rent. I stood up too fast, heart pounding. My laptop was still in the car. Back in the driver's seat, I pulled up the document archive I'd set up during Leora's FAFSA hell. I searched for the fund name, found it, still active. Then I saw the listed manager, Ryan Harwood. I leaned back, trying not to scream inside a car that wasn't mine, in front of a house that no longer welcomed me. I clicked deeper. The fund wasn't being held for Leora, it was being used. Withdrawals labeled as administrative fees and household expenses. Nothing matched tuition or essentials. And Leora? She had no clue. I wanted to call her, to warn her. But the weight of that file on my lap reminded me who they'd chosen to speak for her now. This wasn't an oversight. It was a plan. They didn't just sideline me for being inconvenient. They erased me because I stood in the way. I'd always asked too many questions. Always wanted to see the paperwork, double-check the math, protect the wrong people from the right ones. And now they'd secured the silence they needed. If they were willing to erase me from Leora's life, then what else had they stolen while I was too busy saving theirs? By the time I got back to my apartment, the sun had already tucked itself behind the hills. My headlights lit up the garage door like a spotlight I didn't ask for. I turned off the engine, hands still gripping the steering wheel. I hadn't spoken a word since I left the old house. I didn't have to. I'd heard enough for one day. Inside, I dropped my bag on the floor and sank into the couch without bothering to take off my shoes. The weight in my chest had moved. It wasn't sharp anymore, just heavy, like someone had laid a concrete slab over my ribs and expected me to carry on breathing normally. I didn't open my laptop. I didn't eat. I sat in the silence, the kind that only comes after something breaks. Then my phone rang. I stared at the screen. Dad. Of course. Of course he'd call tonight. I almost let it go to voicemail, but some part of me, maybe the sliver that still needed to confirm this wasn't just a fever dream, pressed accept. Hey, kiddo. His voice came, light, like we were catching up after a ball game. You busy next weekend? I blinked. I need someone to watch the kids while we head out of town. You know, nothing big. Just a little getaway for your mom. Thought you might swing by. I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, stunned by how cleanly he dodged reality. Not a single mention of the paper, or the email, or the trust. Nothing about the fact that I wasn't even family anymore, according to his wife. Are you serious right now? I said quietly. He chuckled. Well, yeah, you've always been good with the little ones. Figured this was no different. It was like talking to a fog bank. Words went in, but nothing solid ever came out. I didn't yell. I didn't lecture. I just waited for him to stop talking, then said, "I don't work here anymore." The silence on his end lasted just long enough to sting. Then came the forced exhale. "Don't be dramatic, Avon. You know how your mother is. Just do what you always do. Show up and hold it together." I ended the call. Just like that. A clean break. I set the phone on the table, face down, and stood up to pour a glass of water. My hands weren't shaking, but they felt foreign, like they'd just handled something too hot or too alive. Not 5 minutes passed before the screen lit up again. Selin. This time, it wasn't a call. It was a message. Long. Too long. I opened it. "If Mom ends up in the hospital again from all this stress, that's on you. You should have stayed quiet. You're being selfish. You always make things harder when you're not in control." I read it once. Then again. It wasn't guilt. It was punishment for stepping out of line. The thing about shame is that it's sneaky. It wears the clothes of love, speaks in familiar voices, and uses your own memories as ammunition. But this? This was no longer disguised. They didn't want me to be part of the family. They just wanted me to keep acting like I was, for their benefit. I didn't reply. I didn't even delete it. Instead, I walked to the window, looked out at the dark street, and let myself feel the edges of the anger that had started to harden into resolve. I had cooked every holiday meal, painted 3 rooms in that new house, held my mother's hand through 2 hospital visits, and stayed overnight once because she was too scared to sleep alone. I had shown up, again and again. And now they were rewriting the narrative to cast me as the villain, for finally stepping out of line. They wanted the free labor, the emotional sponge, the woman who never said no, but I was finally learning how to say it. By midweek, the tension in my chest had calcified into something solid, something cold. It wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about clarity. If I wanted any chance at peace, I needed to get rid of the last thing tying me to their mess. My tools were still at the old house. I had agreed weeks ago, before the contract, before the erasure, to help clear it out. One last favor, Mom had called it. I thought it would be a group effort, sorting memories, saying goodbye. But as I pulled into the empty driveway that Wednesday afternoon, it was obvious I'd be doing this alone. The curtains were gone. So were most of the light fixtures. The air inside was musty, stale in the way that only a lived-in space can get after the people leave, but the tension lingers. I found the cleaning supplies stashed in the hall closet, took a deep breath, and got to work. Room by room, I packed old books into boxes, swept dust from the corners, and wiped fingerprints off walls I'd painted myself. The fridge buzzed louder than usual, like even it was confused about the silence. 2 hours in, sweat running down my back, my phone buzzed. A text from Mom. "We knew you'd want to do it your way. Thank you." I stared at the screen, then placed the phone face down on the counter. That wasn't gratitude. That was strategy. They'd planned to let me believe I was choosing this, to give me a chore wrapped in autonomy. But I wasn't blind anymore. They didn't come because they never intended to. I finished the kitchen, then headed to the garage to grab the last of my things. My old toolbox sat where I left it, covered in dust, wedged between a broken lamp and a paint-streaked tarp. As I lifted it, something slid from behind. A thin manila folder, slightly bent. No label, just wedged tight beneath the edge of the workbench. I opened it without thinking. Inside was a real estate agreement, date stamped 2 weeks before they asked me to help clear the house. Signatures, Thalia and Marvin Harwood. I flipped to the last page. Final buyer's offer. Acceptance. My jaw tightened. They had already sold the house before I ever touched a mop, before I carried a single box, before I gave up a weekend thinking I was helping our family transition. I wasn't helping. I was being used. Again. The words blurred on the page, not from tears, but from fury. A deep, stinging fury that settled low in my stomach, like a stone dropped in water. I snapped a photo of the signed contract and saved it. Then another, close up, in focus. Proof. Proof they hadn't just excluded me. They'd orchestrated my usefulness down to the minute. I set the file down, stood in the center of the garage, and looked around one last time. Every nail I'd hammered, every shelf I'd reinforced, every stain on the floor I'd tried to scrub out. Gone. Papered over. Sold out from under me. They had cashed in, and I was just the cleanup crew. I walked through the house slowly, flipping off light switches as I went. One by one, no goodbyes, no sentimentality, just facts. They'd planned every inch of this. When I reached the front door, I hesitated, not out of longing, but out of finality. Then I stepped outside and locked it behind me. I walked out of that house with nothing, but this time it was on purpose. Back at my apartment, the quiet wasn't peaceful anymore. It was loaded. Every creak of the floorboards, every hum from the fridge felt sharper, like the walls were holding their breath with me. I dropped the toolbox beside the door and went straight for the kitchen table. I pulled out my laptop, set my phone beside it, and laid the photo of the house contract out on the screen like it was evidence in a case I hadn't known I was building until now. Because that's what it was. Evidence. Not just of a sale, but of a decision. A conscious choice to leave me out. Again. I opened a blank folder on my desktop. Labeled it, "They thought I wouldn't notice." I was done pretending this was all just misunderstanding or miscommunication. This was intentional. So I was going to be intentional too. I was midway through cataloging my documents when my phone rang. Not a number I recognized, but it was local. Hello? Hi, this is Jenna from Oregon Mutual. Just a quick follow-up regarding your emergency contact update? I paused. I'm sorry, what? Jenna hesitated. Your sister, Celine Harwood, submitted a change form last week. We were verifying that you no longer wished to be listed as an emergency contact for your parents. I blinked, mouth dry. I didn't submit anything. Another pause. Right, that's what I thought. Your name was on file for years, so I figured I'd double-check. Could you send me a copy of the form she submitted? Jenna lowered her voice. Technically, I'm not supposed to, but yeah, I'll email it. Minutes later, it arrived in my inbox. A PDF scan. I opened it slowly, even though I already knew what I'd find. Celine's handwriting, her email, her signature. She'd removed me, not just from holidays or text threads, but from the actual line of care. From the place where someone would call me if Mom collapsed again, or Dad landed in the ER. The form listed Celine and Ryan as the only authorized contacts. I wasn't even a backup. This wasn't exclusion anymore. This was erasure. I hit print. Then I took screenshots. One of the email, one of the PDF, one of my old policy information, with my name still on record. I added them to the folder. They thought I wouldn't notice. Then I opened a new message. Addressed it to Celine. Attached the PDF. No subject. In the message, you want me gone? Then, let's make it official. You erased me from the record. I'm just following your lead. Let's keep it clean from here on out. No greeting, no sign-off. I hit send, and for the first time in weeks, I breathed all the way in. That night, I got one more call. Dad. I almost didn't answer, but some part of me was still curious. Avon, he said, his voice a strange mix of casual and annoyed. What's all this mess? Your sister's upset. I didn't say anything. We didn't hire outside help for the house because, well, you were there. You've always been there. We figured, why spend money when we have someone we can rely on? There it was. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. You mean someone who's accessible? I asked, voice level. He hesitated. I mean, look, you don't have the same obligations. You've always been available. That word again. Not loved, not trusted, available, like an open storage unit, like a wrench. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't list the years I'd given them. I just said, "From now on, I come with terms, like everyone else you hire." And I hung up. Then I turned off the phone, slid it into a drawer, and closed my laptop. I didn't feel triumphant. Not yet. But I felt clear. They wanted me gone on their terms. If they wanted a clean break, I was finally ready to give them one. With my name signed at the bottom, this time. By Friday, the air had changed. Not just outside, though the wind had picked up and the trees outside my apartment were starting to rattle, but in me. I wasn't raw anymore. I was resolute. That morning, I brewed coffee and sat with my laptop, reviewing the folder I'd been building. Digital breadcrumbs of every decision they thought would go unnoticed. But as I sipped and scrolled, a message pinged through on Messenger. It was my cousin Shelby. "Hey, what's going on with your mom's Facebook? Why is she saying that stuff?" My pulse skipped. I hadn't even opened social media in days. I clicked the link she sent. It was a photo post. My mom standing in front of their new house, smiling with a glass of wine in hand, surrounded by Celine, Ryan, Kale, and Leora. Everyone looked perfectly arranged, like a catalog page of familial bliss. But it wasn't the photo that gutted me. It was the caption. "Surrounded by my true family. It's been a hard choice, but necessary. Some people just aren't blood, no matter what they claim." The comments underneath piled up like dirt on a grave. "So brave to cut out toxic energy. Family isn't DNA, it's loyalty. Proud of you, Thalia. Some people just bring drama." Then came the reply that made my stomach drop. "She's not even my real daughter. She's been estranged since she was a teenager. It's been years of emotional distance. This was long overdue." I couldn't breathe. Adopted? Estranged? Years of distance? I was there last month. I bought the paint for that hallway. I took her to urgent care when she twisted her ankle in February. I made soup from scratch when she was on bed rest. And now I was a stranger? I stared at the screen, jaw clenched, hands trembling. This wasn't just exclusion, it was character assassination. She was crafting a story where I never existed. Or worse, where I had always been an outsider. I wanted to scream, but all I could do was sit there in disbelief while the comments multiplied. I didn't reply. Not there, not yet. Instead, I opened a new browser tab and searched my own name. Nothing yet. But I knew how fast things could spread. It was a strategic play, make me look unhinged, disconnected, unreliable, so that if I ever spoke up, no one would listen. Later that afternoon, my Aunt Jolene texted me. "Hey, I got your mom's holiday card. Thought maybe you'd moved?" Attached was a photo of the card. The Harris family, Thalia, Marvin, Celine, Rion, Kale, and Leora. 6 names, 6 smiling faces. No avenue. Not even a "we miss you," not even a blank spot. I was erased like whiteout, like I'd never been there in the first place. I stared at the image, then saved it to my phone, added it to the folder. Another document. Another thread. At first, the pain was sharp, but the more I looked, the more something inside me steadied. They wanted control of the narrative. They were rewriting the history of my existence, but they didn't own the truth. I closed my laptop, stood from the table, and walked to the small desk near my window. I pulled out an old journal, the one I used to write in during my night shifts back in construction, when I'd jot down material costs and deadlines alongside half-formed poems and rants I'd never say out loud. I flipped to a blank page and started writing. Not a post, not a letter, but my version. Who I was. What I did. What I gave. The truth. It wasn't for them. It was for me, and for anyone who'd ever been told they didn't belong in a story they helped build. If they wanted me erased from their story, I was finally ready to publish my own. The following Saturday, the sun showed up late to Coos Bay, dragging its light across the streets like it, too, had been exhausted by the week. I'd been staying busy, maybe even a little too busy. The cafe down the street needed someone to pick up weekend shifts, and I hadn't hesitated. Coffee stains were easier to scrub out than emotional ones. At the cafe, I moved like muscle memory. Brew. Serve, smile, repeat. Brinley, the owner, had a laugh that cracked through the quiet like fireworks. She didn't ask questions when I volunteered for the early shift. She just handed me the apron and winked. "This one's yours now," she said, patting the register. "No ghosts hiding behind that screen." I liked that. I liked her. On my break, I checked my phone out of habit. A new message blinked across the screen. From Leora. "Hawaii trips canceled." That was all she wrote. No emoji, no explanation. A minute later, another message followed. "Dad doesn't want to pay for help, and everyone's fighting about who watches the kids. He's freaking out. I think Seelan threatened to pull out entirely." I just stared at the screen, sipping my lukewarm coffee with the edge of a smile. There it was. Proof. They didn't miss me. They malfunctioned without me. Every chore, every schedule, every last-minute favor I'd pulled off without complaint. It had been invisible when I was doing it. But remove me, and the whole machine sputtered. I felt something strange rise up inside me. Not triumph, not revenge. Something more like bittersweet relief. The kind you feel when you see a broken fence that used to look perfect until you stopped being the one nailing it back together. That night, while folding laundry in my studio apartment, Leora sent me a third message. A photo. At first, I didn't recognize it. Then I did. The housewarming picture. The one I'd been told not to join. She was in the front row, awkward smile in place, hands folded in her lap. The rest of the family, posed, glossy, perfect. And me? I was in the far background, blurry and bent, carrying a trash bag toward the bin. Almost a ghost in motion, unfocused, half out of frame. But still there, still there. I saved the image. Then I printed it, black and white, and pinned it above my bed, right next to a new sticky note that simply read, "Proof. Not pain. Proof." Because erasure isn't just an act, it's a process. And I was no longer participating. Sunday morning, I showed up early to the community center for my photography class. Naran, the instructor, greeted me with a crooked smile and a Nikon hanging from his neck like a necklace. "Early bird," he said. "I brought questions," I replied. He raised an eyebrow, nodding toward the open window. "Best lights right now. You want to shoot or talk first?" Both. I stayed late after class. Not because I needed the practice, but because it felt like the first place in a long time where no one asked me to shrink. Naren let me try his old Canon. "Every photo tells two stories," he said. "One you meant to capture, and one you didn't realize you were revealing." I thought about that all night. Back at home, I opened my journal again. Wrote, "They blurred me out of the picture. But now, I'm framing my own." 2 months later, the gallery smelled like old wood and fresh paint. The kind of mix that made you feel like something was beginning. Not loud or explosive, just real. I arrived early with Brinley, who helped me carry in the last framed print. Naran was already inside, adjusting a row of spotlight track lights with a folded bandana tucked in his back pocket, like a painter who forgot what century he was in. "Still time to run," he said with a grin. "I walked in," I replied. "I'm not running out." The space wasn't huge, just a converted storefront between a tailor's shop and a used bookstore. But it had character. Brick walls, uneven floors, windows that caught the late afternoon sun just right. One corner had a white painted panel labeled "Local Voices," and beneath it, the centerpiece of my exhibit. A blurry photo from the housewarming, taken from behind the crowd. You could barely see my face, half-turned, mid-step, in the background. I'd titled it, "Out of Frame." Below the title, a caption. "Sometimes being cut out is how we learn where the edge is." People filtered in. Not a big crowd, but not empty either. Cafe regulars. One of my old site managers. A woman I'd met at the co-op who ran a soup kitchen on Thursdays. Naran's sister. Brinley's roommate. Faces that didn't expect me to explain myself. And then, near the back, someone slipped in quietly. I almost missed her. Leora. She didn't make a scene, just found a seat in the back corner and gave me a small wave, the kind you give when you're not sure you're allowed to do more. I walked over. She stood. "Hey," she said, eyes misty but steady. "You made it," I replied. "They think I'm with Kale." She shrugged, pulling a hoodie tighter around her. "I parked 3 blocks away." I smiled, soft and exhausted. "You didn't have to come." "I did," she said. "And they were wrong about you, all of them. I know that now." I didn't cry. I'd cried enough for 2 lifetimes. Instead, I pointed toward the photo. "That's me," I told her, blurred, forgotten, but still there. She stared at it. "You're not blurry to me." We didn't say anything else. We didn't have to. Back in Eugene, I'd heard through my cousin Marcus that things had begun to unravel. The post Thalia made about me not being her real daughter had sparked more than outrage. It sparked investigation. Apparently, one of my uncles confronted her at a family barbecue. Someone else called out Seelan during a church committee meeting. Ryan's role in the trust fund came under quiet scrutiny, and while nothing was pursued legally, the silence that followed was damning. No lawsuits, no arrests. But consequences? Oh, they came. Whispers traveled faster than truth ever could. Reputation is a fragile thing when it's built on fiction. Seelan stopped posting altogether. Marvin got disinvited from poker nights. Thalia's invites were left unopened. They still had each other. But it wasn't the pedestal anymore. It was the echo chamber. That night, after the gallery closed, I sat alone in my apartment with a glass of water and an empty inbox. I wasn't waiting for apologies. I wasn't hoping for mended fences. I'd finally understood something I wished I'd known years earlier. Closure isn't something they give you. It's something you choose to give yourself. I opened the folder I'd kept through it all. Screenshots, copies, printouts, notes. It had become something more than a shield. It was a record, not of revenge, but of reality. I didn't need to post it anywhere. The truth didn't need volume to exist. Before bed, I opened my journal one last time. Final entry. They said I was no longer part of the family. Fine, I built one that included me. Sometimes the biggest betrayal doesn't come with yelling or slammed doors. It comes quietly, dressed as duty, disguised as love. For anyone watching who's ever been the helper, the reliable one, the one who held everything together while quietly falling apart, I see you, I was you, and here's what I learned. You don't owe anyone your silence to keep their peace. Love without respect is just control in a softer voice. And family? Family isn't just who raised you or who shares your name. It's who shows up, who sees you, who keeps you in the frame. You're allowed to draw your line. You're allowed to walk away. And when you do, it's not the end. It's the beginning of your story. So let me ask you, have you ever felt like you were erased from a story you helped build? Or maybe you were the one always saying yes until it broke you. Drop a 1 in the comments if this story hit home, or tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to know which corners of the world are filled with people learning to reclaim their worth. And hey, if this video didn't land with you, that's okay too. Tell me why. I'm here to listen, not just to be heard. If this story touched something in you, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next one. We've got more real stories, more raw honesty, and more reminders that you're not alone in whatever you're walking through. Because sometimes, healing starts with hearing someone else say, "Me too." Take care of yourself. I'll see you in the next one. Hello, my name's Rhiannon, and I thought coming home after a 16-hour hospital shift would mean rest, maybe even just a quiet meal. Instead, I found my bags on the porch. My key didn't fit. And my father, the man who once held my hand at my mother's funeral, looked me in the eye and said, "You don't live here anymore." No warning. No explanation, just a lock changed, and a door that wouldn't open. But that wasn't the worst part, because what they took from me wasn't just a house. They rewrote our family history, without me in it. And now I'm wondering, how long had they been planning it? And why did it take me this long to see it coming? I wasn't asking for comfort. I was asking for a door that opens. It had been 16 straight hours. I could still feel the ache in my knuckles from holding the same pen all day. My ID badge hung from a fraying lanyard around my neck, half soaked by the misty drizzle that had started as I pulled off the freeway. Every breath I took inside the car fogged the windshield, but I didn't bother wiping it. I was already home. My body knew the turns by muscle memory, and my heart had already begun to exhale. It was Wednesday night, late. The kind of quiet where even the neighborhood dogs had settled down, and the only sound was the low thrum of streetlights buzzing through the rain. I parked the car in the same spot I'd always used, right next to the cracked curb under the old elm tree. The tires hissed against wet pavement. My hands moved slowly, heavy. I killed the engine, unclipped my badge, and reached for the door. I wasn't thinking about anything. Not patience, not the charting I hadn't finished, not even the lasagna I'd left in the staff fridge. I was just ready to step inside, but the key didn't turn. At first, I thought I was holding it wrong. My fingers were stiff. I flipped it, tried again. Still stuck. I jiggled it. It scraped, resisted, stopped cold. I leaned closer, squinting through the rain at the deadbolt. Nothing looked off, but I could feel it. Like when you hug someone who hugs back too late. Something was wrong. The porch light clicked on. My father stood in the doorway. He wasn't startled, wasn't tired, just blank, like he'd known I'd show up and had already played out this moment in his head. Leland never raised his voice. He didn't need to. His silence was a language of its own. "You shouldn't be here," he said. I blinked, like maybe he hadn't really spoken. But he just stood there, hands at his sides, expression neutral. No trace of concern, not even curiosity. "My key's not working," I said, my voice hoarse from the shift. "We changed the locks." We, not I, not the landlord. We. I looked down. My duffel bag sat beside the steps, already wet, the nylon soaking through. My backup scrubs were in there. The stethoscope my mother gave me for nursing school. The blanket I always kept in my car for overnight shifts. "I just got off work," I said, stupidly, like that explained everything. He didn't reply. Instead, he stepped back and gently pushed the door closed. Click. That was the sound that cut deepest. Click. Not a slam, not a bang, just a soft mechanical sound, deliberate and final. I stood there for a second too long, just long enough to hear the neighbor's door creak open across the street. Mrs. Lee, in her bathrobe, peered out with a flashlight. She squinted into the rain. "Rhiannon?" she called. "Everything okay, honey?" Before I could answer, my father's voice rang out through the still air, low but unmistakably sharp. "She doesn't live here anymore. She made her choice." That did it. The shame that bloomed in my chest wasn't loud. It was slow, cold, a rising tide that drowned whatever self-respect I had left. I bent down, picked up my bag, and walked slowly back to my car. Not because I didn't want to run, but because I didn't want to fall. He didn't even wait to see if I left. Once inside the car, I turned the key, then stopped. My hands sat on the wheel. I stared straight ahead, breathing through my teeth. My phone was silent. No missed calls, no new messages. He'd said I made my choice. But what choice was that? Choosing to help with bills when he had surgery. Choosing to stay home with him when his second wife left for 3 days without telling anyone. Choosing to move back after Mom died because I thought maybe, just maybe, he didn't want to be alone. Apparently, the only choice I'd made was overstaying my usefulness. The drizzle became a proper rain, tapping softly against the windshield. I didn't cry. Not even when I saw Mrs. Lee still standing at her door, watching me with that look. Pity. Not even when I shifted into reverse and backed out of the driveway I used to bike down every day after school. I didn't cry because I knew if I did, it wouldn't stop. Instead, I drove. Not to Oran's, not to a hotel. I didn't even know where I was going. I just drove, letting the miles pile up like insulation. Half an hour later, I found a gas station with a broken air pump and a flickering light over the ice machine. I pulled in, turned off the car, and sat. He didn't even ask me why. He didn't say, "Come inside." He didn't even say goodbye. He looked at me like I was a stranger, like I hadn't stood in that kitchen with a sponge in my hand and his name on every bill taped to the fridge, like I hadn't changed my work shifts to drive him to appointments when he couldn't walk without holding onto furniture, like I wasn't his daughter. I wasn't angry, not yet. That would come later. Right now I was tired, bone tired, not from the job, but from the way silence becomes a weapon when it's wielded by someone who's supposed to protect you. I glanced at my reflection in the side window. Raindrops blurred it. Good. I didn't want to see myself right then. I didn't want to see the woman who still thought maybe he'd come to the car and knock on the window, that he'd say it was a misunderstanding. But the porch light was already off, so I sat there. In a parked car, outside a nameless gas station on a street I didn't recognize, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me from floating away. I didn't lose a home tonight. I lost a father I thought I still had. He used to say I was his peace. Now I'm just another burden he shut the door on. The lot behind the gas station was nearly empty, except for a white van parked at the edge, engine running, with someone inside staring at their phone. I stayed in my car, hands idle on the steering wheel, letting the heater run long enough to keep my fingers from going numb. I didn't have a destination. I wasn't sure I needed one yet. I'd parked behind the building deliberately, out of sight of the pumps. I wasn't ready to be witnessed again. Not by strangers, not by anyone. That line my father said. She doesn't live here anymore. He said it like we were discussing a change in utilities, like my existence was an outdated account he'd finally closed. But it wasn't sudden. Not really. It had been building. Quietly, strategically. I just hadn't wanted to see it. My mind drifted back to a moment exactly 1 week ago. We'd sat at the kitchen table, the one with a nick on the corner I gave it when I was 12, flipping a pancake too high. Dad had brewed coffee that morning, even though he rarely did. No Verena, just him and me. "You've been working non-stop," he'd said, almost tender. "Why don't you take a few days and visit Angela in Monterey? You've earned a little rest." I remember hesitating. I had work. I had a couple patients I'd been following for weeks. But then he gave me that look. Soft eyes, folded hands, like the man who used to read to me during storms. It wasn't warmth I felt. It was strategy dressed in memory. I said I'd think about it. He told me, "I'll cover the house bills while you're gone. Just go." Rest. I left the next day with a small bag, just a change of clothes, assuming I'd be back before the weekend ended. But the locks had already been changed by the time I hit the halfway point on Highway 101. I just didn't know it yet. That wasn't kindness. It was a setup. It wasn't about space or rest. It was about absence. Mine. An absence they needed to make room for a new narrative, one where I no longer belonged. I glanced at my phone, half hoping for a message from him. Nothing. But a new one did appear. From my cousin, Ryan. "Your dad says you cursed him out last year. Said you called him useless and threatened to cut ties. He says that's why you're out." I stared at the screen, trying to recall the message. I searched through my old texts, found it. Dated 11 months ago. It read, "I'm not sure how much longer I can keep covering the mortgage and groceries if I'm also trying to pay off my loans. I need help. This can't keep falling on me." That was it. No insults, no profanity, just exhaustion. The kind that's lived in your spine for so long, you forget what lightness feels like. But now, that message had a new role. It was being weaponized. That's when I understood. It wasn't about logic. It wasn't even about truth. It was about crafting a story that let him sleep at night, one where he was the wounded father and I was the combative daughter who never appreciated him. He'd always loved saying, "You think the world owes you something." I used to think he said it to keep me grounded. Now I knew it was projection. I closed my eyes, let the silence crawl back into the car. A storm wasn't coming. It was already here. It had been for years. I just kept pretending it was weathering instead of erosion. There was one number I'd never deleted from my phone. One person I told myself I'd only call when things got really bad. I guess being locked out of your own home, your memories repurposed, and your reputation rewritten. That qualified. I tapped Oren's name. It rang once, twice, then his voice. Steady, low. "I've been expecting this call." I didn't speak right away. I hadn't expected that response. I stared at the blinking cursor of silence between us, then said the only thing I had left. He shut the door, Oren. For good. Oren didn't ask for details. He didn't need them. Then maybe it's time you open another. That night, I didn't sleep at the gas station. I drove, not with urgency, but with clarity. I knew I wasn't going back. Not tonight, not next week, not to beg. I was done believing I could earn my way back into that house with patience, or respect, or money. It was never about what I gave. It was about control. The streetlights became fewer as I left the city center. I pulled into the lot of a 24-hour diner, went inside, ordered the cheapest bowl of soup on the menu, and borrowed a napkin to scribble on, not to make a plan, just to write something that was mine. I wrote 3 words. He chose silence. I underlined it, then wrote another sentence. I choose something else. By the time I'd finished the soup, I knew exactly where I was going. And it wasn't back. I'm done hoping he'll choose me. I'm choosing myself this time. I thought cutting ties would feel like grief, but it felt more like exhaling. When I opened my eyes, the first thing I noticed was the silence, not the uncomfortable kind that hangs around empty rooms, but a silence that breathes with you. Still, steady, generous. I was wrapped in a blanket that smelled faintly of cinnamon and old books. The sun hadn't fully risen, but pale light filtered through the dusty blinds in Oren's apartment, casting soft shadows across the faded couch I'd collapsed onto a few hours earlier. I sat up slowly, blinking against the dull ache behind my eyes. My phone was face down on the coffee table, right where I left it after Oren had talked me off the edge last night. I hadn't cried. Still hadn't. But the tears were like seeds under ice, waiting. From the kitchen, I heard the soft clink of mugs. Oren was already up, boiling water like he always did instead of using the kettle. He didn't look up as I entered. "There's coffee," he said simply. I nodded, stepped in, poured myself half a cup. I didn't want to owe the day more than I had to. He finally glanced over. "Did you sleep at all?" "Enough to remember who I am." That made him smile, just a little. He placed a manila folder on the table between us and slid it toward me. "You're going to want to see this." I raised an eyebrow, but didn't ask. I opened the folder. Inside was a screenshot, a forwarded email chain, and at the bottom, a typed line that felt like a slap in the face. Unanimous agreement. Rhiannon no longer has rights to the residence. My breath caught. The email wasn't from a landlord. It wasn't from a court. It was a family thread. Leland, Verena, even my half-brother Caleb. They'd held a family discussion, without me. They'd taken a vote, like I was a line item on a budget, and they'd decided I no longer belonged. "You're kidding me," I whispered. Oren just shook his head. "That came in late last night from someone who still has access to the thread. I redacted the source, for their sake." I stared at the printout. They'd made a spreadsheet, color-coded. Assignments, notes, proposed new furniture placements. My name was in red. Next to it, storage or disposal recommended. "They took a vote," I said again, slower this time. "They took a vote on my worth." There was nothing else to say. I closed the folder, stood up, and grabbed my keys from the counter. Oren didn't ask where I was going. He just nodded, the way people do when they know you're not coming back the same. By the time I pulled into the old neighborhood, the sun had cleared the roofs and turned everything bright, falsely cheerful. It was quiet, except for a lawnmower a few doors down. I parked on the curb across the street. Not in the driveway. That space didn't feel like mine anymore. The garage door was cracked open. I could see Verena's yoga mat rolled up against the wall. A pile of boxes with printed labels sat beside it. Craft supplies, seasonal decor, Zinnia's stuff. I scanned the front of the house, new potted plants, curtains drawn, nothing broken, nothing obvious, just unfamiliar. I walked along the side of the house slowly, sticking close to the fence line. My old bedroom window had new curtains, baby blue, fluttering slightly from a cracked pane. It used to have yellow floral ones. Mom picked them with me when I was 9. I tiptoed across the grass. still damp from the morning, and crouched behind the hedge. I leaned just enough to peer through a sliver in the blinds. My room was gone. The bookshelves I built were empty. The paint was different, a dull, trendy gray. The corkboard that once held photos of my graduation, my late shifts, my mom and me, gone. In its place was a white, lacquered desk with pink post-it notes and glitter pens. The closet door was open. I saw a full-length mirror with LED strips along the frame. On the wall, in fancy script letters, was a mounted sign, Zinnia's Creative Space. My chest tightened, but I didn't blink. Not yet. I stepped back, walked around toward the side trash bin. I don't know what I was looking for. Maybe a sign that I wasn't crazy, that I hadn't imagined living here. Loving here. I found it in the bin. My photo frame, the one that used to sit on Mom's nightstand. A picture of her brushing my hair on the front porch. The glass was cracked, the frame bent. The picture was still inside, but it had been flipped backward, face down. I didn't pick it up. I just stood there, hand gripping the top of the fence, heart doing something strange. Not breaking exactly, but solidifying, like stone drying under sunlight. I didn't knock on the door, didn't scream, didn't throw the frame through the window. I didn't need to. They'd already told me everything I needed to know. I whispered, "You're not erasing me. You're proving me right." Then I pulled out my phone, took one photo of the bedroom door with the plaque on it. Not because I wanted to remember, because I needed evidence. I slid the phone back into my pocket, walked back toward my car slowly, passing the roses I once planted with Mom in the front bed. They were all dead now. Pulled out, replaced with white gravel and faux succulents. Fine. They've replaced me. That means I'm free to start replacing them. If they think I'm walking away, they clearly forgot who built the floor they're standing on. The folder sat unopened on Oren's kitchen table for almost 2 hours before I had the courage to touch it. It was one of those plain manila ones. No stickers, no labels, just the quiet weight of a dozen years' worth of financial paper cuts. He had found it while helping me gather proof of everything I'd paid into the house, grocery lists scribbled on old receipts, transfer records from my checking account to my father's, digital notes I'd forgotten I even wrote. All dated, all logged. But this folder was different. This one, I'd left behind in a drawer when I moved out the first time after Mom died. Back then, I was too emotionally scattered to realize I had left behind evidence of a life I'd built around a man who never meant to keep me in it. I finally opened it, coffee cooling beside me. My thumb brushed over a line item I recognized, $3,500. That was the emergency fund I'd sent Dad last fall. I remembered the transfer clearly. I had just finished working a double at the clinic, my rent was due in 4 days, and I still sent the money without hesitation. I told him, "Just hold on to it for now. I might need it soon." He said, "Of course, baby. You know I've got you." Apparently, he didn't. Because 2 days after I'd sent that money, it went straight into Verena's account. Not for bills, not for the house. I scrolled through the attached Venmo screenshot Oren had printed. Verena's note said it all. Disneyland magic for Zinnia. Zinnia, her daughter, not mine, not even a child anymore. A 24-year-old content creator who hadn't worked a job longer than 6 months and who still thought posting TikToks with voiceovers was a career path. My money, the money I'd earned giving flu shots in parking lots and comforting patients who couldn't afford copays, went to a vacation I wasn't even told about. I wasn't furious. Not right away. That would come later. What I felt in that moment was smaller, quieter. A betrayal so casual it didn't even register as wrong to them. It was just expected. Because of course Rhiannon would pay. Of course she wouldn't mind. She's the reliable one. But I did mind, and I wasn't going to be quiet about it anymore. I pulled out my phone and typed a message to my father. "Do you even remember the roof I patched with my own money?" No reply, but I saw the read receipt. Seen at 10:42 a.m. Silence. His favorite way to win an argument. By never starting one. I stared at the phone for a few seconds longer, waiting for something. Anything. An excuse. A denial. A gaslighting deflection. Instead, there was nothing. Just that small, familiar bubble of non-response, the same one I'd been handed my whole life whenever I asked for clarity. I didn't toss the phone. I placed it face down, got up, and walked to the window. The Sacramento sun was coming in strong now, sharp through the blinds, warming the side of my face as if daring me to melt. But I didn't. I stiffened. I walked back to the table, pulled out the rest of the folder. That's when I found the handwritten list I'd made 2 years ago, my repairs list. It was laughable now. I had scribbled it on an old Safeway envelope. Fix leaking kitchen sink, replace bathroom faucet, cover electric for May-June, pay off overdue gas bill, buy new fridge light bulb. I remembered checking those things off one by one. I remembered crawling under the sink on a Sunday afternoon, watching YouTube tutorials on how to replace a pipe trap while Dad sat in the next room watching TV and pretending he didn't hear the tools fall. I remembered handing him my debit card when the power nearly got shut off. I remembered doing his tax prep when he forgot for 3 years. And then I remembered that now, in the house I helped sustain, my name was scrubbed off everything, including my room. I stood very still. Then I grabbed my phone and called Verena. No greeting, no warm-up. "You spent my money." She paused. I could hear movement in the background, maybe a blender or a hairdryer. "Excuse me?" she finally said, all sugar. "You know exactly what I'm talking about. The $3,500 I sent Dad for emergencies. You funneled it into a Disneyland trip for your daughter." Her voice dropped a note in pitch, the fake innocence melting into passive aggression. "We thought you wouldn't mind. You weren't using it. Besides, it was for family." "Is that what I am now? Not family?" There was a pause. Not even a breath. "You know, Rhiannon," she began, using that slow, condescending tone like she was trying to talk sense into someone emotionally unstable, "sometimes you act like everything in this house revolves around you. Maybe it's time you understood you're not the only one who gave something up." I didn't yell. I didn't even raise my voice. "You touch anything else of mine," I said calmly, "and I won't just come back. I'll come back with paperwork." And I hung up. No dramatic exit, no screaming, just a clean severing of the rope she'd been tightening around my throat for the last 6 years. I walked straight to the hallway, opened my laptop, and searched. Real estate attorney, plus quiet title, plus Sacramento. 5 results popped up. I clicked the one with the highest rating and shortest name. Something about short names made me trust lawyers more. No fluff, no nonsense. I drafted the email carefully. Subject line, quiet title, claim inquiry. Body, hello, I'm inquiring about filing a quiet title action on a property I partially financed, maintained, and lived in for over a decade, which was recently taken over by family without legal eviction. I have proof of contributions, witness statements, and digital evidence. Please advise on next steps. Regards, Rhiannon. Elira Cross. I didn't hesitate before clicking Send. That night, I created a folder on my desktop. I named it Project Elira for Mom. Because this wasn't just about reclaiming a house anymore. It was about reclaiming her memory. The smell of cinnamon in her kitchen, the way she used to hum while folding laundry, the blankets she tucked around my legs on cold nights. They could take my room. They could repaint the walls. They could even throw my face-down photo in the trash, but they would not erase her. And they sure as hell weren't going to erase me. They think they erased me. What they really did was release me. I spent the next morning doing what I'd always done best, sorting, scanning, piecing things together. Except this time, it wasn't for a hospital intake file or a patient case review. It was for me, for the version of myself I'd ignored too long. And that version? She was done playing fair. Oren sat across from me at the kitchen table, his sleeves rolled up, a legal pad in front of him, scribbled with timelines and names. We worked without small talk, the kind of silence that isn't awkward, but efficient. We'd spent most of the morning going over payment logs, utility receipts, my bank statements, anything that showed my consistent, quiet investment in a house I no longer had access to. But the folder I couldn't find was the one that mattered most, the one with my mom's handwriting. "Do you still have the letter from your mom?" Oren asked, voice low, cautious. I froze. That letter. The one she'd written when she knew the chemo wasn't working, the one she told me to open when it all gets too loud. I'd left it in the attic, tucked into the lid of an old shoebox. I hadn't wanted it near me during the years I bounced between leases and long shifts. That letter was sacred, a compass, too fragile to carry around in the chaos. I stood up, grabbing my phone, called my father, straight to voicemail. Next, I messaged Zinnia. It showed delivered. Never read. A knot formed at the base of my neck. 10 minutes later, Oren's phone buzzed. A text from a neighbor he'd reached out to weeks ago when this mess started. Someone who still lived on the street, someone who liked to garden and listen more than she spoke. "Thought you should see this," the text read. Attached was a blurry screenshot from a Ring camera across the yard. In it, Verena stood near a trash bin holding a torn envelope. On it, unmistakably, were the words in my mother's handwriting. To Rhiannon, love, Mom. Verena was mid-sentence in the still. But below the photo, the neighbor had written out what she said, captured clearly from the audio. "She's clinging to ghosts. This house needs cleansing." I nearly dropped the phone. I didn't speak. Oren didn't ask. We both knew. That letter, that one irreplaceable letter, had been destroyed, on purpose, not lost, not misplaced, eliminated. My mother's final words were torn up and tossed out like a junk flyer. I walked to the sink, ran the tap, cupped the cold water in my palms, and pressed it to my face, not to cry, but to stay grounded, to keep from shattering into something I couldn't sweep back up. And yet, as painful as it was, it made everything clearer. This wasn't about a house. This wasn't even about money. It was about control. And their desperate need to rewrite the story with me erased from the script. I dried my hands, went back to the table, and picked up my phone again. This time, I called my brother. Caleb picked up after the second ring. "Why are you stirring things again?" he asked, voice heavy with annoyance. "I'm not stirring anything. I just want to ask you one thing." A long pause. "What?" "You knew about the letter. You saw her write it. You knew what it meant to me." He sighed, that lazy, performative sigh he always gave when responsibility came knocking. "You always make things so dramatic. Dad's tired. Verena's doing her best." I closed my eyes. "And me? What about me? Am I not family anymore?" He didn't answer. "Caleb," I pressed. "Say something." Click. He hung up. I stared at the blank screen, not shocked, just confirmed. Every bridge they burned, they lit with my matches, handed to them over years of silence and compromise. That night, I drove back to the house, not to break in, not to start a scene. I just stood in the backyard, staring up at the window that used to be mine. The curtains were different now, floral, artificial, something pre-made, no doubt ordered online, and praised for being minimalist, but cozy. Nothing like the mismatched yellow panels my mom sewed herself when I was in middle school. Those had heart, these had hashtags. I whispered up at the window, soft but steady. "You broke the last piece of her. Now watch me rebuild everything in my name." The next morning, I met Oren at his office. He brought out a binder. Inside, every proof of my financial contributions, bank transfers, utility logs, Amazon orders for tools and paint, screenshots of messages from Dad asking for help, all dated, all archived. I looked through them one by one. I didn't need revenge. I needed recognition. "They've turned this house into a brand," I muttered. "A story where they're the survivors, but they're not. They're just loud." "Are you ready for how messy this could get?" Oren asked, tapping the binder. "It's already messy," I said, holding his gaze. "I'm just putting it in order." He nodded once, slid a legal envelope toward me. I signed. Over the next hour, we drafted a property claim, quiet title action, legal service notice. Every word was backed by proof, every line typed with intention. I wasn't bluffing anymore. When we finished, I opened my laptop and renamed the digital folder that held everything. Elira Estate, Legal Redemption Plan. Because they hadn't erased me, they'd underestimated me. And that mistake was going to cost them everything they thought they owned. I didn't start this fight, but I'll end it with paperwork and peace. The hum of the fluorescent lights in Oren's office blended with the soft tapping of my fingertips against the thick manila envelope sitting between us. There was nothing inside it we hadn't already seen. Still, we both stared like it might reveal something new if we waited long enough. The folder was labeled with Sharpie. Evidence. Financial plus legal. And then my phone buzzed. I turned it over without thinking. The screen was filled with a message from my cousin, a screenshot. Is everything okay? Your dad's making it sound serious. Below her text was a Facebook post from Leland. He wrote, "Some children forget the hands that fed them. Mental illness is a sad thing, especially when it turns into entitlement masked as victimhood. We pray for her." My throat tightened, not because it was shocking, but because it wasn't. This was exactly the sort of thing he would do, quiet cruelty dressed up in soft concern. The post was designed to invite sympathy, for him, to paint me as unstable, selfish, some fragile mess unraveling because I didn't get my way. The comments were worse. So heartbreaking. You're a good dad, Lee. Keep praying. Entitlement is destroying this generation. I always knew she was trouble, never smiled in photos. And there it was, the court of public opinion, already in session. I felt exposed, not for who I was, but for how he had chosen to frame me. I wasn't a person, I was a warning. I stood, walked over to Oren's printer, hit print on my phone, and watched the post come to life in paper form. When it finished, I folded it in thirds and slid it into the front sleeve of my binder. This goes under character defamation, I said, voice low, right next to the payment logs. You okay? Oren asked carefully. I'm not mad, I said. I'm motivated. That night, as I sat alone in my room at Oren's, the guest room his aunt used to stay in, now filled with extra blankets and stacked paper files, something clicked. A memory I hadn't reached for in years. It was from the last winter Mom was alive. We'd spent a Saturday afternoon cleaning out the attic. She was trying to declutter, she said, but I knew she just wanted to control what happened to her things. We found a small fireproof safe tucked under the far wall. She laughed when she opened it, not because of what was inside, but because she'd almost forgotten she owned it. Inside were 3 things: her original will, the deed to the house, and a sealed envelope labeled, "For Rhiannon, when they forget." She hadn't handed it to me then. She'd tucked it back inside, said it wasn't time. I never thought to look for it again. Until now. The next morning, I called Mrs. Lee. She answered on the first ring. "I've been waiting for your call," she said. "They're all out of the house today. You've got a 2-hour window." I didn't ask how she knew. Mrs. Lee always knew. I drove straight there, parked 2 houses down, and slipped through the side gate with the key she'd given me. The back door was still the same, creaky hinge, old screen, but I didn't go inside. I went up. The attic hadn't changed. Same musty air, same uneven boards. I moved slowly, avoiding the spot near the chimney that always threatened to cave. When I reached the crawlspace wall, I felt along the edge for the false panel. It came off easier than I expected. There it was, the safe. Combination lock. I closed my eyes, took a breath, and tried the numbers I remembered. My birthday, Mom's, and the day we planted the lemon tree out back. Click. The lid opened. The envelope was still there, yellowed but intact. So was the deed, notarized with my name. Transferred from Leland to me at the age of 21. Executed quietly, never registered publicly, but legal. My breath caught in my throat. I held the papers like they were sacred, because to me they were. I wasn't powerless, not anymore. When I returned to Oren's, I walked in without saying a word and placed the deed on the table. He looked at it, then at me, then back at the document. "Are you serious?" he asked, stunned. I nodded. She made sure I'd be protected. He just never thought I'd find it. Oren ran a hand through his hair. "They're going to lose everything." "Good," I said. "They don't deserve it." That afternoon, we filed the preliminary documents for property ownership. The email I sent included screenshots of the deed, the signed transfer, my mom's note, bank records, and, just for good measure, the Facebook post. Subject line: Formal service. Property claim, Elira Estate. Less than an hour later, Verena replied, You wouldn't dare. I stared at the blinking cursor for a moment before typing back. Already did. I didn't smile. This wasn't about satisfaction. It was about setting a boundary that should have been honored years ago. When I shut my laptop, the room felt different. Not brighter, but cleaner. Like something toxic had finally left the air. I didn't start this fight, but I was damn sure going to finish it. With paperwork and peace. If they want war, they better pack light. The email was still open on my screen, its subject line burning like a silent dare. House transfer, final negotiation. Except this wasn't a negotiation. This was the part where I stopped asking nicely. I didn't reply, not yet. First, I needed to finish what I'd started. The next morning, I arrived at Oren's office before he did. The cleaning crew hadn't come in yet, so the whole place smelled faintly of last night's coffee and printer toner. I didn't mind. The familiarity steadied me. At 9:05 a.m. sharp, a knock came at the door. Oren was just walking in, cup in hand, when the courier handed over the envelope. Thick. Sealed. Official. It was the response from Leland's attorney. I took it without a word, opened it slowly, and read every line. They weren't contesting the deed, at least not directly. They were arguing emotional duress, lack of understanding of the consequences, and no formal registration. Classic smoke and mirrors. They're hoping to bury this under paperwork, Oren said, scanning the same lines I had. Delay tactic. Well, I replied, let's not let them. After we finalized the next steps, I went through my own files again, not just for the legal process. For me, I found something I hadn't noticed before, an email thread between Verena and my father that had been accidentally forwarded to me years ago. I'd archived it, assuming it was a mistake. Now I opened it. Subject line, timeline for clean transition. Verena had written, once she's out, we can get a better rate. Zinnia deserves more space, and refinancing while rates are still low would be smart. You said Rhiannon was considering moving anyway. Let's finalize before she backtracks. And Leland's reply? Agreed. Let me know the soonest we can make it stick. I didn't breathe for a moment, not out of shock, but out of something heavier. Confirmation. I wasn't just pushed out. I was an obstacle in a financial plan. They weren't grieving me. They were replacing me with a better interest rate. I printed the thread and placed it on top of the binder marked Motivation. It was almost noon when the next blow landed. My phone pinged. A message from Lisa J., a childhood friend I hadn't spoken to in months. We'd grown up on the same street, had sleepovers under glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, even got matching bracelets from the county fair. Her message was short. Your dad posted again. Are you really suing him? I blinked, then sighed. Another post. Of course, I opened Facebook. I hadn't logged in for days, not since the last incident. There it was, Leland's latest masterpiece. Forgiveness is hard when you've been attacked by someone you raised. But we continue to pray for her healing. Some wounds are self-inflicted. The comments poured in like a familiar poison. She should be grateful she had a roof at all. You tried your best, Lee. It's always the quiet ones who turn on you. I didn't even feel anger this time. It was like watching strangers talk about a character I didn't recognize. Only, they were talking about me, and it still cut. I sent Lisa screenshots of the deed, the signed transfer, the payments, the emails. I typed, this isn't about revenge, it's about truth. I'm not the villain in their bedtime story. No reply. 3 hours later, I saw her name in the comments. It's sad what entitlement can do to a good family. That one stung more than I'd like to admit. But pain is a funny thing. It either breaks you or it builds something in you that wasn't there before. I opened a new folder on my desktop and labeled it, Receipts, Not for War, for Peace. Oren came into the room with a stack of exhibits for filing. You sure you want to push this far? He asked. They started it, I said, but I'll be the one to finish it clean. He watched me for a second, then nodded. Once this hits court, they might dig everything. Be ready for backlash. I've already been burned, I said, slipping Lisa's comment into the folder. Now I'm fireproof. Later that evening, I cleared the dining table and spread everything out. The deed, the payment logs, screenshots, the letter from Mom, the photos, even the one of Verena holding the ripped envelope with my name. And then, on top of everything, I taped a single photo. Elira, holding me on the front porch, her face soft with love, sunlight in her hair. We looked happy. And we were, once. She never fought for herself, I whispered. I will. Oren returned with takeout and found me sitting in silence, staring at that photo like it could speak. You okay? He asked. Getting there. We ate quietly. The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual. The legal deadline for them to vacate was now 72 hours away. I didn't sleep that night. I reviewed the documents again, practiced responses in the mirror, thought about every lie told about me, every door shut in my face, every birthday forgotten because it wasn't convenient. Around 3:17 a.m., my inbox dinged. New email. Subject, house transfer, final negotiation. The sender, Verena. Not the attorney, not Leland. I clicked it open. We'd like to discuss an amicable solution before this escalates further. Amicable. Now they wanted peace. I closed the laptop slowly. If they want war, they better pack light. They didn't just lose a house, they lost the right to rewrite my story. 3 days had passed, slow and sharp like a dull knife. Every hour carried the weight of years they thought I would forget. But the waiting was over. This morning wasn't about memories or regrets. It was about the truth, printed, signed, sealed, and ready. I got dressed with purpose, not armor, no red, no black. A cream blouse, navy slacks, clean lines, simple. I tied my hair back, no lipstick, no dramatics. Oren picked me up at 8:00 a.m. Sharp. Neither of us said much during the drive. The silence between us wasn't tense. It was steady, like the inhale before a solid step forward. By 9:30, we were parked 2 blocks from the house. We waited for the court officer to arrive. I didn't want to walk in there before the law did. Not because I was afraid, but because I'd spent enough years being told I was emotional, too intense, making things bigger than they were. Today, I'd let the system speak for me. At 9:58, I stepped out of the car. My heels made small, confident clicks on the sidewalk as I approached the house, the same house I grew up in, the house where I learned to braid my hair in the hallway mirror, where I ate cereal with Mom on Sunday mornings and watched her fold towels just the way she liked them, always in thirds. I knocked once. The door opened slowly. Verena stood there, wearing a robe, hair tied in a towel, as if I'd disturbed her spa morning rather than arrived with a legal blow. She didn't say hello. I didn't say anything either. I handed her the thick envelope, legal notice, final ruling, eviction order, transfer confirmation, all of it. She blinked fast. You think this will hold up? I met her eyes. It already has. The silence stretched. Behind her, I heard the soft shuffle of Leland's footsteps. He came into view, shirt unbuttoned, glasses hanging from his collar. So this is how you treat your father, he said. I didn't flinch. You stopped being my father the moment you changed the locks. For a split second, something flickered across his face. Maybe regret, maybe just annoyance. But it passed. I turned and stepped off the porch. 2 minutes later, a car pulled up. Official plates. Court officer stepped out, briefcase in hand. He walked straight to the door, knocked twice, identified himself, then posted the notice on the frame. 24-hour vacate order. Enforced. Verena shouted something, a mix of rage and confusion. But the officer remained calm, nodding politely, pointing to the papers. You can read it. You've been served properly. You have until 10 a.m. tomorrow. Zinnia appeared next. Still in pajama pants and a sports bra, phone in hand. She was live streaming the entire thing. Her voice was loud, dramatic. She's evicting her own family, you guys. We're being kicked out by my sister. I didn't bother correcting her. We weren't sisters. We never were. I was the one who paid for her oat milk and internet bills when she decided she wanted to build her brand. And now, her audience was watching her version of heartbreak, carefully framed, filtered, and hashtagged. I stood still, watching from the sidewalk. This wasn't my mess to untangle anymore. This was their unraveling. Slowly, neighbors began to step out. One by one. No one said a word. A few glanced my way, nodded. Some simply watched. Mrs. Lee came out last. She wore her usual gardening apron, mug in hand. She didn't speak, just lifted the cup slightly in quiet acknowledgement. I returned the gesture. Leland looked around, eyes scanning the street like it betrayed him. No one came to his defense. And just like that, the house didn't belong to them anymore. Not legally, not emotionally, not symbolically. I turned and walked back to the car. Once inside, I let out a long, slow breath. My hands were steady. My chest no longer felt like it was trying to hold back a scream. I checked my phone. Still no message from Caleb. Still no apology. Still no, I didn't know. But there was a voicemail from the law office. Miss Cross, just confirming the transfer is complete. The property is now fully in your name, uncontested. Congratulations. I didn't smile, but I did close my eyes for a moment and let the silence soak in. No chaos, no accusations, just finality. Orrin looked over at me. You want to get lunch? Not yet, I said. I need to see something first. We drove past the house once more before leaving the neighborhood. The eviction notice flapped slightly in the breeze. Verena had closed the door, but not fully. The screen door remained open. A cardboard box sat on the porch now, maybe already packing. They'd had time to choose differently, to be decent, to admit fault. But they chose war. And war doesn't end with apologies. It ends with a reckoning. I didn't stop at a restaurant. I didn't post a victory message online. I drove back to Orrin's, poured myself a glass of water, and sat down at the table. I opened my laptop, created a new document, titled it, New Deed, New Rules. Because the house wouldn't just be mine by law, it would become something else entirely. Something that didn't lie. Something that wouldn't erase people like me. They didn't just lose a house. They lost the right to rewrite my story. And now that the story is mine again, I know exactly what to do with it. The key turned cleanly. No resistance. No need to jiggle it or press my shoulder into the frame like I used to when the door stuck in winter. It opened like it knew I belonged there. I stepped inside. The house greeted me with a breath, lemon oil from fresh polish, and the faint scent of dust that settles in places untouched for months. I paused in the entryway, hand still on the doorknob. No voices, no footsteps, just quiet. For the first time in years, it didn't feel like I had to tiptoe through my own history. There were no shoes at the door, no Verena yoga mat curled by the stairs, no Zinnia vision board taped to the wall. The chaos had cleared, and in its place was something that felt blank, but not empty, ready. I left my keys on the counter and walked the perimeter slowly, one hand trailing along the walls, not just checking what was gone, but noticing what had stayed. The scratch on the hallway paneling from when I ran my bike inside at age 7, still there. The chip in the kitchen tile Mom never got around to fixing, still waiting. In the corner of the dining room, the old cabinet with the loose hinge creaked as I touched it. I didn't open it. I just nodded at it, like an old friend I hadn't seen in a while. Later that afternoon, after unpacking nothing, because I brought nothing, I sat in what used to be the living room and opened my laptop. The neighborhood was quiet, the sun soft through the front windows. That kind of light only late spring gives, forgiving and honest. Facebook opened without me asking. The first thing I saw was silence. Leland's profile hadn't posted anything in days. All his dramatic declarations, his prayers, his pleas for sympathy. Gone. Deleted. A neighbor had posted a video of the eviction. No caption. Just a simple line. Sometimes justice is quiet. It had over 300 reactions, dozens of comments, but none of them were from Leland's usual defenders. According to Orrin, Leland and Verena had moved in with Verena's sister in Bakersfield. No forwarding address, no new posts, Just gone. It wasn't the kind of justice you see in movies. No big speeches, no tearful apologies on the front lawn. Just a disappearance, a quiet fade out from a stage they once claimed as theirs. I closed the laptop. Later that night, I received a voice note from Lisa J. "I didn't know," she said. Her voice cracked a little. "I believed what I was told. I'm sorry." I didn't delete it. I didn't respond either. Some bridges don't need to be burned, but not all of them need to be crossed again. A few days passed. The house began to breathe again. The room that used to be mine, the one once claimed by Zinnia, turned into her creative space. I reclaimed it, but not for sleeping. I painted the walls a warm amber, the kind of color that catches candlelight and makes even silence feel safe. I hung a small wooden plaque on the door, "Elira Room, for women finding their way again." It wasn't a slogan, it was a promise. I partnered with a local nonprofit that helps women leaving emotionally abusive households, the kind of trauma that doesn't leave bruises, but builds cracks you trip over for years. I offered the room as short-term shelter, quiet, clean, private, because I knew what it was like to need space and not be given any. The first guest was scheduled to arrive in a week. In preparation, I restocked the bathroom with supplies, fresh towels, unscented soap, a journal with a pen clipped to the cover. Not because it fixes anything, but because being seen starts with the smallest gestures. I stood in the kitchen one night, stirring tea the way Mom used to, counterclockwise, with a spoon that never clinked too loud. "I still miss you, Mom," I whispered to no one. "But I'm not lost anymore." A few days later, a letter arrived, handwritten, no return address. It was from Leland. "I thought I was protecting what was left," he wrote. "I see now. I was destroying it." That was it. No plea for forgiveness, no apology, just acknowledgement. I didn't respond, but I didn't throw it away either. I tucked it behind the photo frame of Mom and me on the front porch, not to remember him, but to remember the truth finally spoken. That weekend, I planted herbs in the backyard, rosemary, thyme, basil, simple things. But they grew fast, like the house was ready to start over too. The porch light stayed on at night. One evening, just after sunset, someone knocked. I opened the door. A young woman stood there, holding a worn duffel, shoulders tense. "Hi," she said. I think I'm here for the Elira room?" I stepped back and held the door open. "Come in," I said. "You're safe here." She looked around, hesitant, took a breath, then smiled. "Did this place always feel like home?" she asked softly. I thought for a moment. "Not always," I replied. "But now it does." That night, after showing her the room, explaining the routine, and leaving her with her own quiet, I walked down the hallway, past the old family photos, some removed, some reframed, and turned off the lights one by one. The house felt warm, not from heat, from peace. It exhaled with me. The door they locked behind me now stays open for others. Sometimes, the loudest form of strength is quiet, not inaction, but intention. Rhiannon didn't scream. She didn't seek revenge with rage. She sought truth with quiet clarity, and that made all the difference. Have you ever been cut out of your own family's story, only to realize maybe it was the best thing that could have happened? Let us know in the comments. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow for more true-to-life tales that dig deep into what family really means. Hello, my name is Inara. At dawn, my sister kicked down my door, dragged me into the pouring rain, and beat me while my parents sat in the car and watched. But the truth is, that wasn't the first time they erased me. For years, they rewrote our family story, cutting me out of photo albums, stealing the program I created, even switching my grandfather's will. I was the invisible one, the sensitive one, until the night their silence became louder than her fists. What would you do if your own family decided you didn't exist? The house smelled like pot roast and polished wood, the kind of scent that should make you feel safe. Outside, it had been drizzling since morning, a gray mist hanging over Salem like a wet blanket. I stood in the kitchen of my mother's home, well, the home that used to feel like ours, adjusting the final tray of deviled eggs on the buffet table. The paper lanterns I'd strung earlier swayed slightly in the breeze, slipping in through the half-open back door. Vera's party had to be Pinterest-worthy, she said. And I'd made it that way. Like always. The guests were arriving in clusters, stepping inside with forced laughs and shaking off umbrellas. I smiled, offered plates, poured wine. I even found a moment to wipe a muddy footprint off the entry rug before Celeste noticed. She hated mess. Everything had to look perfect. Not for her, but for them. For the cousins, the board members, the neighbors who meant something. I heard my name once the entire afternoon, a quick, "Thanks, Inara," from Vera when I handed her a mimosa before her big speech. That was it. From the hallway, I could see Vera standing on the makeshift stage we'd arranged in the living room. The house was filled with people clapping, cheering for her as she announced her promotion to VP of some branding firm that made water bottles look like holy relics. She wore white, of course. Tailored, expensive, radiant. The kind of woman magazines would call effortlessly powerful. Then came the speeches. Her assistant spoke first, then Mom, then Dad, though he said maybe 3 sentences, tops. And finally Vera, who grabbed the mic with the same poise she'd once used to grab my part in the school play when we were kids. She thanked everyone, her colleagues, her mentors, her dog, even the barista at her favorite coffee shop. "Some people just get me," she laughed. "Everyone did too, except me." My smile froze when I saw the printed program. 3 pages, glossy paper, her picture on the cover like a wedding invitation. On the back page, "Special thanks to everyone who made today possible." No mention of my name. Not once. Not even in the fine print. The cake arrived next. Fondant, custom-made, monogrammed. "To the daughter who carries us all." I stood near the kitchen doorway, gripping my plastic champagne flute so tightly it creaked. I'd spent 3 nights making sure that cake arrived on time. Vera had given me the task, of course, and I'd executed it like every other thing she handed me. Invisibly, perfectly. No one looked at me. No one noticed I wasn't clapping. I left the room before the candle cutting. In the kitchen, I sank onto a stool. My hands still smelled like lemon zest and vinegar from prepping the salad dressing. I looked at the dish towels on the counter, folded precisely the way Mom liked them, and thought, if I walked out right now, would anyone follow? That wasn't just self-pity, it was a genuine question. Back home that night, after loading all the leftover potato salad into Tupperware and scrubbing out 2 casserole dishes I'd brought from my own place, I sat down at my dining table and opened my old laptop. I pulled up a folder labeled Family Docs. One subfolder read, Grandpa's House. A month ago, while helping Mom declutter before Easter, I found a yellowing envelope tucked inside one of Grandpa's law books. Inside was a handwritten will. Not the official, notarized document that Vera had been parading around last Thanksgiving. No. This one was older, signed in my grandfather's delicate scrawl, and very clear in its intent. To my granddaughter, Inara, who sat with me in silence, who listened without interruption, who made soup when no one else remembered I hated canned broth. I leave the house, with all its rooms, to her. She sees things the rest of us choose to ignore. I scanned it, saved it, hid the hard copy in my fireproof box. At the party today, Vera had made a little announcement between applause breaks. We'll be renovating the back patio soon. Now that the house is finally under my name, it's time for upgrades. Celeste stood beside her, clapping. Even Dad nodded in approval. My mouth went dry. They'd changed the will, or ignored the original. Either way, they pretended I didn't matter. And maybe that's what stung most, not the legal theft, but the casual erasure. They didn't even bother lying to my face. I sat alone that night, staring at the folder. The PDF glowed back at me, grainy but legible. I zoomed in on Grandpa's signature. I could almost hear his breathing, slow, wheezy, but steady. As I handed him a cup of lukewarm tea that winter, he slipped on the ice and bruised his ribs. I whispered aloud to the quiet room. They took everything but my silence. That, they'll regret. I clicked print. The document spat out from my dusty cannon like a forgotten relic. I placed it in a plastic sleeve, then slid it under the tray on my nightstand. I didn't sleep much. The rain had picked up again. I counted the drips on the window pane like heartbeats, but I didn't cry. Not yet. I didn't sleep much that night. My mind kept replaying Vera's voice from the party, so smooth, so sure of herself, like every lie she told was just another clever pivot. The room smelled like damp paper and lemon cleaner. I'd cleaned out the sink after coming home, more out of habit than necessity, scrubbing at a spotless counter like I was trying to erase the way her voice sat in my head. It was just after 6 a.m. when I woke again, my eyes already open before the alarm went off. Rain pattered gently outside, same as the day before. Salem had a way of cloaking betrayal in weather that felt too soft for how cold people could be. I reached for my phone and immediately saw the red notification bubble. 37 unread messages. At first, I thought maybe someone had posted pictures from the party and tagged me. Maybe someone noticed I was missing from the program, from the cake message, from the entire event. But then I saw the subject lines. All variations of one thing. Thinking of you. You're in my prayers. Don't take it personally. The kind of things people say when they've picked a side, and it's not yours. The forwarded email came from Aunt Rochelle, no message attached, just a subject line. For context. I opened it. Vera had sent an email blast to the extended family. The header said, "Family harmony and disruption. Let's talk honestly." Beneath it, her words unfolded like a speech rehearsed for years. She wrote that she'd always tried to be a bridge between personalities, that grief can manifest in divisive behaviors, and that one family member has chosen to weaponize old paperwork to stir distrust and confusion. She never used my name. But she didn't have to. Vera had CC'd our cousins, the uncles from Eugene, the women from Mom's prayer group, even the retired couple who used to babysit us. Toward the end, she added this. It's important to recognize when a loved one is struggling with clarity. We love her, but we can't allow one person's unresolved trauma to poison our unity. I sat there, the phone warming in my palm, the words burning holes in my chest. Within 10 minutes, the texts started coming. Aunt Rochelle again. Sweetheart, you should talk to someone. Vera's just trying to hold the family together. My cousin Jess unfollowed me on every platform. A neighbor from 2 streets over wrote, I know family is complicated. I hope you find peace. Peace? I hadn't gone to war. I'd served dinner. I'd stacked plates, lit candles, arranged hydrangeas for a woman who turned around and painted me as unstable. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I stared at the screen until the battery dropped to 8%, then set the phone face down. By 8 a.m., I'd brewed coffee, stood under a hot shower, and stared at my reflection for 10 full minutes. The towel turban on my head was slipping, but I didn't bother fixing it. Eventually, I dressed and sat at my desk. My apartment was quiet, warm. The soft hum of my space heater filled the silence. I opened my laptop. There was a folder already waiting on the desktop. Contingency plan. I had created it months ago, never really thinking I'd need it. I clicked it open. Inside were copies of Grandpa's original will, time-stamped scans, a note I'd written to myself. If they erase you, leave evidence. I added a new file, screenshots of Vera's email, replies from family, even a screen recording of my text conversation with Mom from the night before. At 10:11 a.m., I called her. She answered on the 3rd ring. Hi, honey. Her voice was measured, too light for what we both knew was coming. Did you see the email? I asked, a pause. Vera's just trying to keep the family from falling apart. I held the phone tighter. She changed Grandpa's will. Let's not rehash that, Inara. It's complicated. It's not complicated, it's theft. Mom sighed. You're overreacting, and this isn't the way to handle it. I waited for her to say more. She didn't. Okay, I said quietly. Good to know. There was no goodbye. Just a click. I sat still for a long time. The heater kicked off. My coffee had gone cold. I pulled out a legal pad from my drawer, scribbled a few lines, scratched them out. Then I opened my email and began drafting a message to someone I hadn't spoken to in a while. Laura, a lawyer I'd met at a library conference last year. She'd given a talk on estate disputes and navigating power imbalances in families. Her card was still tucked in my drawer, underneath a thank you note she'd handwritten. I wrote, "Hi Laura, I don't know if you remember me, but we met during the Women in Leadership panel at Salem Central Library last spring. I'm dealing with a complicated family situation involving an altered will, character defamation, and a growing need for legal clarity. I'd appreciate a few minutes of your time, if possible. Warmly, Inara Dufresne." I read it 3 times before clicking send. Then I opened the email thread again, Vera's Poison dressed up in pastel fonts, and began drafting a reply. I was careful, meticulous. I quoted her words exactly. I asked for evidence of her claims. I included my own attachments. Before hitting send, I refreshed the page. Vera's original message had been locked, no longer editable. A new final line had been added. "Inara has chosen to remove herself from the family. Let us respect her wishes." My hands clenched into fists, not from anger, but from resolve. They'd drawn the boundary for me, so now I would draw my own. The scent of lavender still clung to the fabric as I folded the blanket and set it on the foot of my bed. The same one I'd planned to drape gently over Mom's shoulders during her hospital stay, if they had let me in. I couldn't shake that final line from Vera's email. Inara has chosen to remove herself from the family. Chosen? Like it was some personal preference, not a consequence of being shut out, shut down, and now physically kept from the woman who birthed me. 2 weeks before the celebration, I got the call. It was a Thursday. I was shelving books in the nonfiction section at the library when my phone buzzed against my hip. Unknown number. I stepped into the back office and answered. "Is this Inara Dufresne?" "Yes. This is Salem General. Your mother, Celeste Dufresne, was brought in this morning after collapsing at her home. She's stable but in ICU. She's been asking for you by name." The nurse's voice was calm, but firm, like she'd said those words 100 times. I didn't ask for details. I just said thank you, scribbled down the room number, and left my cart mid-aisle. I grabbed my tote bag from under the desk and hurried out the side door. On the way to the hospital, I stopped by my apartment just long enough to grab Mom's favorite lavender body lotion and the soft fleece blanket I gave her for Christmas. She used to call it her cloud. I knew she'd want it more than any hospital sheet. By the time I got to Salem General, it was early afternoon. The lobby was quiet, just the low hum of vending machines and a receptionist typing at her desk. I stepped up, breathless. "I'm here to see Celeste Dufresne," I said, holding my driver's license out instinctively. The woman checked her screen. Her fingers paused mid-keystroke. "I'm sorry, but visitation is currently restricted to immediate authorized family members." "I am immediate family," I said, too quickly. "Her daughter." Another pause. "I understand. I'll need to check with the floor nurse." She picked up the phone. I heard low murmurs on the other end, something about already there and not wanting to escalate. Then she hung up and looked at me with a smile too polite to be kind. "Someone will be down in just a moment." 2 minutes later, I saw Vera coming around the corner. She was dressed in a sleek, cream-colored coat, hair pinned back like she was headed to a meeting, not sitting with a sick parent. "Inara," she said, as if we were catching up at brunch. "I'm here to see Mom." Vera didn't stop walking until she was 2 feet in front of me. "She's resting. The doctors don't want her agitated." She asked for me. She was confused, barely conscious. She didn't know what she was saying. I held up the blanket. "I brought this. She'll want it." Vera crossed her arms. "This isn't the time. Let's not make this harder than it already is." "Harder for who?" I asked, quieter than I meant to. She didn't answer. Instead, she nodded subtly at a nurse behind the desk. Seconds later, a uniformed man appeared near the elevators. "Security? You've got to be kidding me," I muttered. "Inara," Vera said, voice low, like a warning. "Don't do this here." I looked at the security officer, then back at her. "I'm not here to fight. I'm here because she called my name. She needs rest. That's all." And just like that, I was escorted out, not by force, not even with a raised voice, but with the firm, quiet push of someone who'd been told I was a problem. Outside, the rain had started again, fine mist soaking the concrete as I stood near the side entrance, the blanket still in my hands. Through the large ICU windows, I could see rows of beds, monitors blinking like distant stars. Somewhere in there was my mother, hooked up to machines, surrounded by beeping, and, if Vera was telling the truth, confused, half aware. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass, straining to see past the privacy curtains. My reflection stared back at me, blurry and pale. A nurse walking by glanced at me, slowed. "Excuse me," I said, quietly. "My mom, she's in there. Celeste Dufresne. They wouldn't let me in." She looked at me for a long beat. Then she leaned in and whispered, "She asked for her youngest 3 times before she fell asleep." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Back in my car, I sat still for almost an hour. The windows fogged up. I didn't turn the engine on. I didn't listen to music. What was I doing? Why had I kept trying? I had accepted so many small insults, so many moments of exclusion disguised as family dynamics. But this was different. This wasn't a missed thank you or a name left off a program. This was a door locked from the inside, a mother silenced by a daughter too determined to control the narrative. And me? I had walked away. Again. At some point, I opened my phone. The draft I'd been crafting, my careful response to Vera's family-wide email, was still sitting there. 4 paragraphs of restraint, logic, proof. I deleted it. Then I renamed the folder on my desktop. Not contingency plan anymore. Evidence. Phase 1. This wasn't about clarity anymore. This wasn't about being seen. This was about being heard. I drove home, the blanket on the passenger seat beside me like a person. When I got in, I set it at the foot of my bed. The scent of lavender rose gently into the room, as if Mom was still here, breathing beside me. I sat down on the edge of the mattress, stared out the window at the rain, and whispered into the silence. She called for me, and they locked the door in her name. After I folded the blanket and placed it at the end of the bed, I stood there in the stillness of the room for longer than I expected. No music, no distractions, just the soft hum of the heater and the scent of lavender that wouldn't leave. I didn't want it to. It reminded me of what I'd almost had, and what Vera had so easily kept from me. That Sunday morning, rain came down with the same kind of quiet conviction Vera used in her speeches, constant, steady, and unwilling to let up. I padded barefoot to the front door when I heard the mail slot clink open. A padded envelope dropped to the floor. The return address had Ruth's name on it, Mom's cousin from the coast, the one who still called me Baby Bird at Thanksgiving even though I was in my 30s. I carried the package to the kitchen counter and sliced it open with the edge of a butter knife. Inside was a hardbound book wrapped in tissue paper. A note taped to the cover read, "Grandma's 80th, family photo album, 1 per household, love, Ruth." A part of me hesitated, but another part, the part still trying to believe I wasn't invisible, flipped it open anyway. The first few pages were expected, black and white wedding photos of Grandma and Grandpa, handwritten captions from different relatives. Then came the childhood section, Vera. Page after page of Vera's life. Her first piano recital, her softball trophies, the time she volunteered at the animal shelter. Pictures of her in Halloween costumes, Vera on vacation, Vera holding a sparkler in her Sunday dress. Mom's face appeared in most of them, smiling like she was standing next to royalty. Dad showed up occasionally, usually stiff in a button-down, looking more like a background actor than a parent. I turned to the high school pages. Celeste's school photos from her early years teaching. A few shots of family barbecues. My uncles, my cousins, all there. I kept flipping, waiting. Finally, there I was, in a blurry photo in the background of Vera's college graduation. I was near the buffet table, apparently mid-blink. The caption underneath read, "Vera and her helper cousin." I blinked, stunned. That was me, not some cousin, me. There was one other picture. I was maybe 12, sitting cross-legged near a fireplace at a holiday party. Everyone else in the photo had their name in the caption. I was just others. It was one thing to feel forgotten. It was another to be deliberately mislabeled. I closed the album, my hands stiff. But I didn't cry. Not this time. Instead, I walked over to the hallway closet and pulled out the storage bin I hadn't opened since last summer. Inside were my old school trophies, the dusty folder of my volunteer certificates from high school, and a copy of the press release I'd written 6 months ago for the community literacy program I started. It came rushing back. How excited I'd been, pitching the idea to the board. I'd proposed that the Dufresne Family Foundation sponsor a reading initiative for underserved teens at the public library. They had all agreed. Mom had even told me she was proud, which was a rare currency. I handled the launch details myself, partnered with local educators, developed the curriculum, everything. But on the launch day, I walked into the event and saw the banner hung across the back wall. Dufresne Literacy Project, led by Vera Dufresne. She was standing at the podium, microphone in hand, with Mom right behind her. I remember walking toward them, waiting for Vera to acknowledge me in the speech. She never did, not once. When I asked Mom about it after the event, she just smiled and said, "You've always been more comfortable behind the scenes, sweetheart. Vera shines. Let her. Let her." That phrase had followed me all my life like a leash. Let her take the lead. Let her handle the press. Let her speak. Let her be the face. Let her pretend it was all hers. I took the photo album, opened it back to the pages I appeared in, and stuck 2 bright red sticky notes on the corners of the photos. Then I pinned them to the corkboard above my desk, not out of pride, but as evidence. Proof that I existed, that I was there, even when no one wanted to remember. Later that afternoon, I called Mom. I didn't even know what I expected to hear. She picked up on the second ring. "Hi, honey." "I saw the album," I said. Pause. "Oh, Ruth sent those out already?" There's a photo of me in the background of Vera's graduation. You know what the caption says? Silence. "Vera and her helper cousin." She exhaled. "Sweetheart, I didn't write the captions." "That's not the point," I said. "And the literacy program? That was mine. You knew it. Vera said you didn't want your name on it, that you get overwhelmed in public settings." "No," I snapped, keeping my voice from shaking. "You didn't want me visible." Another silence. Then flatly, "You're overthinking everything again." I ended the call. No goodbye. No explanations. Back at my desk, I opened my laptop and checked my email, and like the perfect punctuation to my day, there it was. A forwarded message from the board of the nonprofit. Due to internal conflict, Vera Dufresne will retain the lead role in the Dufresne Literacy Project indefinitely. I didn't even get a courtesy BCC. I closed the lid of my laptop. My jaw tightened until it ached. Then I said it out loud to the empty room, my voice low and calm. One more lie, and I will no longer be polite about the truth. So I will. That was the last thing I said before I closed my laptop, walked to the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water with hands that wouldn't stop trembling, not out of fear, but from the strange combination of fury and clarity that comes only when the last thread finally snaps. It had been less than 24 hours since I told Vera in plain language that I wouldn't stay quiet anymore. No legalese, no apologies, just facts. Her reply, one sentence. "Try it." That night, I left my phone on silent and spent hours going through an old drawer in my bedroom, the one I hadn't opened since Mom's funeral. Inside was a photo of her hands resting on her lap, her wedding ring glinting in the morning light. I'd taken it years ago during a backyard brunch when she was still healthy, still calling me her calm one. She never said it in front of Vera, of course, but I remembered it clearly. The next morning, a voicemail appeared. "Dad. Sweetheart, can we talk? Let's just put all this to rest." No mention of what this was. No acknowledgement of the email thread, the photo album, the literacy project, or the missing ring. Just a calm, vaguely paternal tone, as if he were settling a dispute between neighbors about a tree branch. I waited until early afternoon before calling him back. I didn't want to answer in the morning when I was still half tired and more likely to fold. He picked up right away. "Hi, honey." "Hi, Dad." I'm glad you called. I know things have been difficult lately. Is that what we're calling it now? He chuckled softly. Look, I know you and your sister don't always see eye to eye. She's been stealing credit, manipulating family, and publicly erasing me. And that's a bit more than not seeing eye to eye. There was a pause, then the tone, the one I'd grown up with. Sweetheart, we all make mistakes. Your sister, she's been under a lot of pressure. And your mom, well, she wouldn't want this kind of tension between you two. I could hear him leaning back in his chair, probably in the den, surrounded by dusty books and silence, like always. You know your sister didn't mean to hurt you, he continued. She just gets caught up in, well, you know how she is. I do, I said flatly. This family's been through enough, Inara. We need peace, unity. I nearly laughed. So I should just let her keep rewriting history because it's easier for everyone else? She's not rewriting anything. Maybe you're just being a little sensitive. There it was. That word. It landed in my gut like a brick. Sensitive, I repeated. You've always been the emotional one, he said gently, like he was offering me a compliment. You feel things deeply. And sometimes that makes things harder for you. It's not a flaw, honey. It's just who you are. I sat still, staring at the photo of Mom's hands on the desk beside me. Do you remember what she told me about the ring? I asked. Silence. Because I do. Word for word. Inara. She said, that ring is for you. I want you to have something that's truly mine, not Vera, me. He exhaled into the phone. Your mother wasn't well at the end. You know that. You were there. You heard her say it. She probably said a lot of things. You know how people get near the end, confused, trying to make everyone happy. She wasn't confused, I said, my voice steady. She was trying to leave something behind that Vera couldn't steal. He didn't respond. I let the silence stretch. Eventually, I ended the call without saying goodbye. Afterward, I opened the bottom drawer of my dresser and unlocked the fireproof box where I kept the voice memo. It was an old recording, 2 years before her stroke. We'd been sorting Christmas ornaments in the living room, and I'd been testing out a new app that let you save audio clips and transcribe them. I hadn't meant to record anything meaningful, but the voice note caught it all. That ring is for you, baby. You always notice the small things. Vera has the house and the spotlight. But you're steady. I want you to have something that's just mine. Don't let her take that too. Her voice sounded strong, like it used to, like it remembered me. I played it again, then a third time. Each replay burned the truth a little deeper into me. The next morning, I wrote the email. Subject, formal notice, unauthorized use of family assets. To Vera Dufresne. CC, Dad, Aunt Rochelle, Board of the Dufresne Foundation, Cousin Jess, Ruth, 3 community partners. Body. Effective immediately. Any further unauthorized use of family name, assets, or associated materials connected to the Dufresne Literacy Program, or any personal property designated for me by Celeste Dufresne, will result in legal review and public documentation. This message serves as official notice. All communications should now go through counsel. Inara Dufresne. I reviewed it 3 times. No aggression, no name-calling, just precision. When I hit send, a calm settled over me. For the first time in years, I felt clean. The next day, the reply came, 1 line. Try it. No signature, no pretense. I stared at the screen, let the cursor blink below those 2 words like a dare. Then I closed the laptop and whispered to myself, so I will. It had rained all night. Not the dramatic kind, the slow, insistent sort that crept under windows and soaked your bones if you stood still long enough. My apartment was quiet, save for the ticking of the wall clock and the soft creak of wood as the building settled into the early hours. I'd been awake since just after 5 a.m., unable to fall back asleep. I sat at the kitchen table, nursing a lukewarm cup of tea, reviewing the email chain again. Vera's 1-line response, try it, still lingered like a dare on the screen. My body was tired, but my mind was sharp. I had already lined up legal consultation. Evidence was categorized, recordings saved, dates logged. I wasn't just documenting the past anymore. I was preparing to reclaim my future. The world outside was still dark when I returned to bed, thinking I could squeeze in another hour of rest before sunrise. I hadn't been under the covers more than 10 minutes when a pounding erupted at my front door. Hard, frantic, and unmistakably familiar. My heart jumped. Then, instinct took over. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, swiping quickly to open the voice recording app I kept pinned to the home screen. One tap. The red light blinked. The audio was live. Then came her voice, muffled through the door, but clear. "Inara! Open the damn door!" I didn't move. My pulse pounded in my ears. "I swear, if you don't open this door right now..." I slid my feet into slippers, grabbed my phone, and walked slowly down the short hallway. The rain outside had picked up again, lashing against the building. I flipped the porch light on, careful not to unlatch anything. "Go home, Vera," I said, loud enough to be heard. "You hiding now? After the stunt you pulled? Sending emails to the whole damn family like you're some victim? This is your last warning. Walk away." A beat of silence. Then the crack. The wood splintered at the hinges as she slammed her shoulder into the door. The first blow didn't break it. The second did. The door flew open. The chain lock tore clean off. My body froze, not in fear, but in disbelief. Vera stood there, soaked to the skin in a white trench coat. Mascara streaked under her eyes. She looked unhinged, but controlled, like someone who knew what she was about to do and planned to make it hurt. "You want war?" she said, stepping forward. "Let's go." She grabbed my arm, twisting it. I dropped my phone. The recording kept going. The red light blinked steadily from the floor. She yanked me forward. I tried to resist, but I slipped. Bare feet, wet floor, bad combination. "Let go!" I shouted. She didn't. Her grip tightened. Next thing I knew, I was dragged out into the rain, barefoot and stumbling. She was yelling, but I barely heard it. My focus narrowed on the silver sedan parked at the curb. Inside sat Celeste and Dad, both watching, neither moving. Vera shoved me down onto the lawn. My knees hit the wet grass. I tried to crawl backward, but she came at me again, grabbing fistfuls of my t-shirt. "You think you're better than us now?" she hissed. Rain soaked my hair, ran into my eyes, my mouth filled with the taste of dirt and metal. I didn't hit her back. I didn't scream. I just stared beyond her, straight at my mother through the windshield. Celeste didn't blink. She didn't even roll the window down. "Mom," I said, half whisper, half plea, "this is your legacy." Still, she looked away. Vera let go of me then, not out of mercy, out of disgust. She turned and stormed back toward the car, throwing the soaked coat off in the process. She climbed into the back seat. The sedan reversed down the street and disappeared around the corner without headlights. I sat in the mud until the tremors in my arms stopped. Eventually, I made my way back inside. The door hung sideways, the lock shredded. I shut it best I could and collapsed onto the floor just inside, dripping wet and breathing in slow, shallow bursts. The red light on my phone was still blinking. I picked it up. Timer running, 12 minutes and 28 seconds. I didn't listen to it, not yet. Instead, I walked to the bathroom, peeled off my soaked clothes, and stood under the shower for a long time, letting the water wash away the bruises that hadn't yet bloomed. After I changed into dry clothes and bandaged my wrist, I sat on the couch and opened my laptop. Then I remembered the security camera. My landlord had installed one facing the building entrance last winter after a string of stolen packages. I rarely thought about it, until now. I logged into the tenant portal, entered the timestamp window, and downloaded the footage. It was all there. Vera on the porch. Her foot slamming into the door, me being dragged out into the pouring rain. The car parked. My parents inside. Still. Watching. Every frame, time-stamped. Every scream, recorded. I watched it twice, once with a blank stare, once with a hand clenched so tightly around the mouse I thought it might crack. Then I saved it, backed it up to a hard drive, uploaded a private copy to cloud storage. Sat in the darkness of my apartment, staring at the frozen image of Vera walking away, rainwater dripping from her clenched fists. I wasn't just assaulted, I was erased, dismissed, silenced. And now I had proof. The storm hadn't ended, but the wind had quieted, the kind of stillness that settles over a neighborhood just after something ugly happens, when the air doesn't quite know how to move forward. I sat at the small table in my kitchen, towel-dried hair clinging to my shoulders, and stared at the laptop screen still glowing from the footage. I didn't sleep. Instead, I replayed the video again and again, Vera's foot against my door, her hands on my arms, the shove, the fall, and most of all, the car, the figures inside it. My mother, staring straight ahead. My father, still as stone. That's what broke me. Not the bruise on my jaw or the torn shoulder seam. It was the absolute stillness of their faces, the way their silence was louder than her violence. Just after 8 a.m., there was a knock at my door. Soft, measured. For a split second, my body tensed, instinctively recoiling. But this wasn't the heavy pounding from earlier. This was a gentle knock, almost hesitant. I peered through the peephole. Mr. Granger. I opened the door slowly. He stood there in his navy windbreaker, hat tucked under his arm, holding a flash drive in his hand. "I know it's early," he said, voice low, "but I saw what happened." I didn't speak. I just stepped aside and let him in. He walked with slow, careful steps, settling into the armchair near the window like he belonged there. "My porch camera caught everything," he said, holding up the drive. I sat across from him, unsure of what to say. "You helped me 2 years ago," he added. "When I fell on the sidewalk, cracked 2 ribs, you were the only one who stopped." I remembered. I'd been walking home with groceries when I saw him curled up on the pavement outside the coffee shop. I waited with him until the ambulance came, even brought him his mail for a week while he recovered. "This is me returning the favor," he said simply. I reached for the drive, hesitated, then took it. "Thank you," I whispered. He nodded once, then stood. People don't always show who they are until someone's watching. Now, someone is. After he left, I loaded the footage. His camera had a different angle, wider, clearer. You could see Vera pacing before the door cracked open. You could see me being pulled. You could see the car, and the faces. There was no ambiguity. I attached the file to an email to my lawyer. Then I uploaded a backup copy to cloud storage and labeled it Exhibit A, Video. I hadn't planned to share it with the world, not yet, but that wasn't up to me anymore. By noon, the footage had leaked. I don't know who did it. Maybe the lawyer's assistant. Maybe someone at the building who caught wind of it. But by 2 p.m., my name was trending on a small local Facebook group for Salem residents. By 4 I was being tagged in posts, comments, messages from strangers. This is appalling. That woman needs to be in jail. No wonder the youngest daughter left the family. Look at this. Where was the mother during all this? Oh, right, she was watching. The comments came fast and furious. Some from people I knew only in passing. Others I'd never met. By the next morning, a clip had gone viral on TikTok. It showed me being pulled into the rain with the caption, "She warned them. They didn't listen." Vera, of course, didn't stay silent for long. Around noon, she posted a photo on Instagram, one from 2 years ago, a family portrait from Thanksgiving. All of us dressed in coordinated fall colors, smiling with wine glasses in hand. The caption read, "Don't believe everything you see online. Mental illness can twist perception." It was subtle, vague, but sharp. Celeste commented beneath it, "We love all our children equally. Some just need more help than others." That one cut deeper than I expected. It wasn't just dismissive, it was surgical. Research. Designed to say everything without saying anything. I didn't respond. Not on Facebook, not in comment sections, not even in private texts. Instead, I opened a new folder on my desktop and labeled it. All of it. Inside, I dropped the following. The full email thread between Vera and the extended family. The video footage from both my security camera and Mr. Granger's porch. The scanned original will with Grandpa's signature. The voice memo from Mom about the ring. Screenshots of the nonprofit statement listing Vera as lead. Photos of the photo album captions. Then I opened my email and drafted 3 messages, one to a local reporter I'd met during a library journalism panel, another to a former college classmate who worked at a mid-size news blog, and a third to a friend of a friend who freelanced for a women's magazine. The subject line on all 3 was the same. I have a story to tell, and evidence to back every word. I hit send. That night, I received a message request on Instagram from an account with no profile photo. "Hi, I'm Sophia. I saw what happened. I'm Vera's old friend. You're not alone." I stared at the screen, unsure whether to reply. Then another message came. "She did the same thing to me, years ago. Different face. Same script." I believed it was just me. It wasn't. My chest tightened. Not in panic, but in relief. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't exaggerating. Vera wasn't just my nightmare. She was a pattern. Sophia's message stayed with me long after I read it. I sat still on the couch, the screen glowing dimly in my lap, her words looping over and over. She did the same thing to me. Different face. Same script. Something shifted in me. Not out of vengeance, but recognition. There it was, finally spelled out by someone who owed me nothing. Vera didn't just hurt me. She repeated herself, and people let her, again and again, not this time. The next morning, I met with Laura Delgado, a community rights attorney I'd been corresponding with since the footage leaked. Her office was small, buried in an old brick building across from a bakery. Inside, the smell of lemon pastries mixed with paper and coffee, the kind of aroma that makes you feel seen. I brought everything: the USB drive with the videos, the original scan of Grandpa's will, the screenshot of Vera's email campaign, Mom's voice memo about the ring, the forwarded nonprofit letter, the Facebook comments, all of it. Laura didn't flinch once as she reviewed the files. She asked precise questions. She took notes. When she finished, she leaned back, met my eyes, and said simply, "They erased you. Now you'll erase their lie." That afternoon, Laura helped me draft a press statement. I rehearsed it out loud 3 times in her office. The first time, my voice wavered. The second, it shook. The third, it held. The following day, I stood behind a wooden podium in a borrowed conference room at the Salem Community Center, surrounded by reporters holding microphones and iPhones. Some I recognized from the local paper, others from blogs or news startups that had picked up the viral clip. The room smelled like warm plastic and tension. My hands didn't tremble. Not this time. "My name is Inara Dufresne," I said. "I'm here today because silence has protected the wrong people in my family for too long." I paused. This isn't just my story. This is every woman who's been silenced by her own blood. A quiet fell over the room, the kind of quiet you feel in your chest. I went on to explain, not everything, but enough: the footage, the family's response, the legacy theft, the smear campaign, the ring. I answered every question calmly. When someone asked, "Why go public?" I said, "Because I already tried private," and they locked the door. Vera, of course, refused to appear. Instead, her representative released a generic statement to the press. Ms. Dufresne is saddened by the personal attacks launched by her sister and hopes for healing within the family in due time. No denial, just vagueness wrapped in concern. She knew what she was doing. But by the time I left the center, #Justice for Inara was trending locally. The clip of my speech had already hit 25,000 views. Support messages were flooding my inbox. One woman wrote, "Thank you. You spoke for all of us who didn't have a camera rolling." That night, Laura officially filed my lawsuit: defamation, assault, mishandling of estate assets. A legal notice was sent to Vera, Celeste, and the board of the Dufresne Foundation. Everything time-stamped, signed, sealed. Walking home, I passed the small church I used to attend as a child. I hadn't been inside it in years, but I paused at the steps, looking through the frosted glass at the familiar glow of sanctuary lights. I didn't go in. I didn't need to. My healing wasn't in prayers whispered behind stained glass. It was in action, in saying things out loud, in standing when they thought I'd crawl. As I turned the corner onto my street, my phone buzzed. Voicemail from Celeste. I hesitated. Then I listened. There was no message, just her breathing. It cracked in the middle, like she was holding in a sob. But she didn't speak. Eventually, the line cut off. I stood on my porch in the dark, one hand on the railing, the other still clutching the phone. There were tears in my eyes, but not for her. For the version of me that waited so long for her voice to say, "I believe you." Inside, I lit a candle, not for grief, but resolve. The next morning, a courier arrived. I opened the envelope in the kitchen, next to the sink still filled with last night's dishes. Vera had filed a counterclaim, character assassination, emotional harassment. My eyes scanned the legal jargon, absorbing it in silence. My pulse didn't spike. I didn't panic. I laughed. It wasn't loud or cruel, just a dry, quiet sound. Because of course she would. Of course she would try to weaponize the very truth that had finally cracked her performance wide open. I looked down at the stack of evidence on the counter, then out the window, where morning light had started to bleed across the trees. If they want a war of truth, I said aloud to the empty kitchen, I'm no longer afraid of the battlefield. By the end of that week, my inbox was a battlefield. Supporters, skeptics, legal inquiries, press contacts. But among the storm of voices, some shouting in defense, others whispering suspicions, one line stood out. Due to recent developments, the library has placed your position under internal review. It came from HR, cold, concise, no empathy, no context, just a link to a meeting invite and a reminder to check policy documentation on personal conduct during public disputes. A week later, they let me go. Official reason? Reputation risk to institutional trust. Unofficially, I had become a liability. The quiet librarian with the calm demeanor had suddenly become the girl from the video, the one suing her sister, speaking to reporters, trending on social media. I didn't argue. What was there to say? What hurt more wasn't the job. It was Beth. We'd been best friends since orientation week at university. Shared apartments, heartbreaks, Thanksgivings. She knew everything. Or I thought she did. The day after I got the library notice, I opened Instagram and saw a post from her account. A photo of her and Vera at a brunch spot I recognized, arms locked in a side hug, captioned, "Family matters are private. Let's choose healing." I didn't call. I didn't comment. I closed the app and let the tears come. Not from betrayal, but the tired, numb ache of realizing you've outgrown someone you thought would always be there. That night, I poured myself a glass of red wine, sat in front of my laptop, and rewatched my own press conference. The one with the two bright overhead lights and the microphone that squeaked when I first touched it. I listened to myself say, "This isn't just my story." And somewhere between the third and fourth playback, I said out loud, I was right to speak. Even if they all leave. The next morning, something unexpected happened. A journalist from a national women's publication, someone I didn't know, but whose work I deeply respected, published an op-ed titled, "The Woman They Tried to Erase," in Nara's story. She'd compiled every piece of evidence, my speech, the voice memo, screenshots. She even tracked down other women who had been bullied or manipulated by Vera, like Sophia, and quoted them with care and context. It wasn't sensational. It was thorough, grounded, devastatingly clear. Within hours, it was everywhere. Shares, reposts, reaction videos. People with platforms 10 times the size of mine were calling out the system that let families silence the quiet ones. A Change.org petition started to reinstate me at the library gained traction, over 15,000 signatures in 3 days. I didn't know what to do with it all, so I did the only thing I knew. I showed up. I accepted an invitation to speak at a community center panel about surviving emotional abuse within families. I helped organize a book drive for survivors re-entering the workforce. I sat with women in small circles and said the words no one had said to me when I needed them. You are not hard to love. You are not crazy. And you are not alone. One night, 2 weeks after the article went viral, I received another voicemail. I recognized the number immediately. Celeste. Her voice cracked before she even finished the first sentence. I failed you. I let her do this to you. I don't deserve forgiveness. She didn't ask me to call back. She didn't try to defend herself. It was the first honest thing I'd heard from her in years. I didn't return the call. Instead, I replied with a text the next morning. It's not about deserving, it's about changing. She didn't write back. Months passed. Seasons shifted. And one morning, nearly a year to the day after Vera dragged me into the rain, I walked down the same street I grew up on, past the church, past the old diner where Dad used to get Sunday coffee, past the family house. It looked the same, mostly. The shutters were freshly painted, the garden trimmed. The air smelled like mulch and blooming rhododendrons. I paused for a moment at the edge of the driveway. Vera stepped out onto the porch, her hair pulled back, phone in one hand, mug in the other. She didn't see me, but I saw the ring, still on her finger, still gleaming. She had kept it, like she always did, with everything that wasn't hers. I didn't flinch. I kept walking. That evening I spoke at a local university event titled Rewriting the Narrative. The room was filled with people who didn't know me, but somehow knew exactly how I'd felt. I stood behind a wooden podium again. No cameras this time, just faces, real ones. And I said, justice doesn't always look like courtrooms. Sometimes it's waking up and knowing you are no longer afraid. I looked out at the women in the front row, two of them wiping tears, another nodding, lips pressed tight. They tried to break me, I said, voice steady, but I walked through the rain, and I kept walking. Family can wound us in ways no stranger ever could, but silence is what keeps those wounds alive. Speaking the truth may cost you relationships, but it gives you back yourself. What do you think? Would you choose peace at any price, or risk everything to finally be heard? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story.